She was 3 seconds from execution when her wolf exploded through her skin and the entire kingdom fell to its knees. If you want to know how a forgotten slave became the most feared queen in werewolf history, stay until the end. Hit that like button and comment which city you're watching from. Let's see how far this story travels. The bucket hit the stone floor with a crack that echoed through the empty corridor, soapy water spreading across the frozen tiles like spilled blood. Lyra Vance didn't flinch. She'd learned long ago that flinching only made things worse. "Stupid ghost," muttered the cook as she stepped over the mess, her thick boots splashing through the water without a backward glance. "Can't even hold a damn bucket." Lyra's fingers were numb. Had been numb for hours, maybe days. Time blurred in Ironvale Citadel, especially for someone like her. Someone without a name that mattered, without a face anyone remembered, without a past anyone cared to know. She knelt in the freezing water and began mopping it up with her bare hands, her threadbare dress soaking through immediately. The cold bit into her knees, her palms, her bones. But cold was familiar. Cold was her oldest companion in this fortress of ice and stone and cruelty. Ghost, that's what they called her. Not because she was quiet, though she was. Not because she moved through the citadel unseen, though she did. They called her Ghost because to them, she barely existed at all. No one knew where she'd come from, not even her. 6 months ago, she'd woken in the servants' quarters with blood crusted in her hair and a mind as blank as fresh snow. No memories, no family, no explanation. Just a name whispered in the dark corners of her fractured thoughts. Lyra. The head housekeeper had taken one look at her and assigned her the worst jobs in the Citadel, scrubbing the Alpha King's floors, emptying chamber pots, hauling firewood in storms that could strip the flesh from your bones. Work that broke backs and spirits. Work meant for the forgotten. And Lyra had accepted it all without question, because what else could she do? Where else could she go? The world beyond Ironvale's walls was a mystery wrapped in snow and darkness, and the world inside was all she had, even if it hated her. She wrung out her dress as best she could and picked up the bucket, her joints screaming in protest. The grand hallway stretched before her, lit by torches that cast dancing shadows on walls carved with the history of the Kael bloodline. Generations of Alpha Kings stared down at her from painted portraits, their eyes cold and judging. She was supposed to scrub this entire hall before dawn. It was impossible, of course, but impossible was just another word for expected when you were a ghost. Her feet left wet prints on the stone as she made her way toward the supply closet, each step careful, measured. She'd learned to move quietly, to make herself small. Loud people got noticed. Noticed people got hurt. But even moving like a shadow couldn't save her from every encounter. "Well, well, look what crawled out of the gutters." The voice slithered through the air like oil on water. Lyra's stomach dropped. Lady Sereth Crow stood at the top of the staircase, draped in furs that probably cost more than Lyra would earn in 10 lifetimes, if she even earned anything at all. Sereth's beauty was the kind that cut. Sharp cheekbones, calculating amber eyes, lips that smiled while her gaze promised violence. She descended the stairs slowly, deliberately, flanked by 2 handmaidens who wore expressions of practiced cruelty. "I heard something scuttling around down here," Sereth continued, her heels clicking against the stone. "I thought perhaps we had rats again, but no, just you." Lyra kept her eyes down, her hands gripping the bucket handle until her knuckles went white. "Don't speak. Don't react. Don't give her anything to use against you. Look at me when I'm talking to you." The command cracked through the air like a whip. Lyra's head lifted automatically, trained obedience overriding her instinct to hide. Sereth's smile widened. There she is, the mysterious little ghost who appeared out of nowhere. "Tell me, do you remember yet? Do you know who you are? Or are you still just empty?" The handmaidens giggled, the sound sharp and mean. Lyra's throat worked, but no words came. What could she say? The truth was a weapon they'd already learned to wield against her. "Nothing?" Sereth tisked, stepping closer. "How disappointing. I was hoping you'd at least developed a personality by now. But I suppose some creatures are born to serve. Born to be... nothing." She reached out and flicked the edge of Lyra's wet dress, her nose wrinkling in disgust. "You're dripping all over the floor. Clean it up." I was about to... "Now." The word dropped like a stone. Sereth's eyes flashed, not the full golden glow of a wolf's dominance, but enough to send a spike of instinctive fear through Lyra's chest. A reminder of the hierarchy, a reminder of her place at the very bottom of it. Lyra dropped to her knees and began mopping up the water her dress had dripped, her hands shaking. Not from cold this time. From something else. Something that lived in the hollow space where her memories should have been. Something that whispered, "You weren't always this small." But that was impossible, wasn't it? Sereth watched for a moment longer, her smile satisfied, then swept past with her handmaidens trailing behind her like well-trained hounds. Their laughter echoed down the corridor long after they'd disappeared around the corner. Lyra stayed on her knees until the sound faded completely. Then, slowly, she pushed herself upright and continued her work. The citadel swallowed her again, and she let it. The screaming started at midnight. It always started at midnight. Lyra was hauling a bucket of ash from the kitchens when the sound tore through the stone walls. A child's wail, high and desperate and full of agony that no infant should be able to produce. The kind of crying that made even hardened soldiers flinch. The kind that made something deep inside Lyra's chest tear. She dropped the bucket, ash scattering across the floor in a gray cloud. Her hands flew to her chest, pressing against the sudden, overwhelming ache that bloomed there like a wound reopening. What is this? It happened every night, every single night since she'd arrived. The Alpha King's son, barely 3 months old, would begin screaming, and Lyra would feel like something was clawing its way out of her ribcage, desperate to reach him. She'd never seen the child. The royal wing was forbidden to servants like her, guarded by warriors who'd sooner kill her than let her pass. But she didn't need to see him to feel the connection. She didn't understand it, couldn't explain it, but it was there, undeniable as gravity. "That cursed brat," muttered one of the kitchen girls as she hurried past, hands clamped over her ears. 3 months of this, 3 months. Someone should just... She caught herself, eyes darting around nervously before she scurried away. But Lyra had heard the whispers. Everyone had. The Alpha King's heir was cursed, born wrong, born broken. Some said his mother, the late queen, had been touched by dark magic before she died in childbirth. Others claimed the child carried a demon in his blood. No one knew for certain. But everyone agreed on one thing: the boy would not survive the winter. The crying intensified, and Lyra gasped as the ache in her chest became a lance of pure pain. Her vision blurred, her legs buckled. "Go to him!" The thought came from nowhere and everywhere at once, a command written in the language of instinct rather than reason. Go to him now. She was moving before she made the conscious decision, her feet carrying her toward the forbidden corridors, even as her mind screamed that this was insane, that she'd be killed, that she had no right. But the pain wouldn't let her stop. The royal wing loomed before her, its entrance guarded by 2 massive warriors in the king's colors, silver and black like storm clouds over ice. They stood at attention, their faces carved from granite, their hands resting on sword hilts. Lyra slowed, her breath coming in short gasps. What was she doing? She was a servant, a ghost. She had no business here, no reason they would accept, no... The baby's scream rose to a pitch that seemed to crack the air itself. And Lyra broke. She sprinted forward, past the guards' shocked shouts, through the doorway, down corridors lined with tapestries and weapons and wealth she couldn't begin to comprehend. Behind her, she heard boots pounding, voices yelling, but she didn't stop. Can't stop. The nursery door stood open, golden light spilling into the hallway. Lyra burst through it and froze. The room was chaos. 3 nursemaids huddled in the corner, their faces drawn and exhausted. A physician stood by a cradle, wringing his hands helplessly. And in the center of it all, in a cradle carved from black wood and inlaid with silver, an infant thrashed and screamed like his soul was being torn apart. No one noticed Lyra at first. They were too focused on the child, too lost in their own helplessness. But the baby noticed. His screaming cut off mid-breath, his thrashing stilled, and his eyes, bright, burning silver, locked onto Lyra with an intensity that stole the air from her lungs. She moved without thinking, pushing past the startled physician, her hands reaching for the child, even though she had no right, no permission, no... The moment her fingers touched his skin, everything stopped. The pain in her chest vanished like smoke and wind. The baby's crying ceased completely. And in the sudden, ringing silence, Lyra looked down into eyes that mirrored her own. not in color, but in something deeper. Recognition. I know you. The thought came from him, from her, from the space between them where something ancient and unbreakable lived. I know you, and I have been waiting. What in the frozen hells? The physician's voice shattered the moment. Lyra stumbled backward as hands grabbed her arms, wrenching her away from the cradle. The baby began crying again immediately, but softer now, confused rather than agonized. "Seize her!" someone shouted. "The servant! She touched the heir!" More hands, more voices. Lyra was dragged backward, her feet skidding across polished floors, her mind still reeling from what had just happened. What she'd felt. What the child's eyes had told her. Mine. The word blazed through her thoughts with absolute certainty. That child is mine. But that was impossible. She had no memories of pregnancy. No memories of anything before 6 months ago. She couldn't be his mother. The late queen was his mother. Everyone knew that. Everyone, bring her to the throne room. The voice cut through the chaos like a blade through silk, deep, cold, and utterly authoritative. The kind of voice that made wolves bow and warriors tremble. The Alpha King. Lyra's blood turned to ice. She'd never seen Dravenkale up close. No one like her ever did. He was a figure of legend and terror. The youngest Alpha King in 3 centuries. A warrior who'd crushed rebellions and conquered territories with ruthless efficiency. They said he could kill with a look, that his wolf was a monster of shadow and fury, that he'd loved his queen so desperately that her death in childbirth had frozen his heart forever. And now Lyra was being dragged before him for touching his son. The throne room doors opened with a groan of ancient hinges. Torchlight flickered across walls hung with battle standards and the mounted heads of enemies. The throne itself sat on a raised platform of black stone, carved from a single piece of mountain rock, and upon it, Lyra's knees hit the floor as the guards forced her down, but her eyes stayed locked on the figure above her. Dravenkale was not what she expected. Tall, yes. Powerful, obviously. His shoulders were broad enough to carry the weight of a kingdom. His presence so dominant it seemed to pull all the air toward him. But there was something in his face that the legends never mentioned. Pain. It lived in the lines around his eyes, the set of his jaw, the way he held himself like a man who'd forgotten how to rest. His hair was dark as a moonless night, his eyes the color of winter storms, and when they settled on Lyra, she felt the full force of his scrutiny like a physical weight. "Explain," he said simply. One word, but it contained volumes. The head guard stepped forward, his voice clipped and professional. "The servant entered the royal wing without permission, sire. Breached the nursery, laid hands on the heir." A ripple of shock ran through the assembled court. Lyra could feel their stares like knives against her skin. Draven's expression didn't change. "Is this true?" The question was directed at her. Lyra opened her mouth, but her voice came out as barely a whisper. "Yes." Why? How could she explain it? How could she make him understand something she didn't understand herself? "The crying," she managed. He sounded like he was in pain, and I had to." "You had to?" Sareth's voice cut across the room like a whip. Lyra's head snapped up to find the noblewoman standing near the throne, her expression one of calculated outrage. "You had to violate sacred boundaries and touch the future king of Ironvale because of crying?" "It wasn't just crying," Lyra said, her voice growing stronger despite her terror. Something was wrong. Something was wrong, so you decided to play nursemaid?" Sareth's laugh was cruel and bright. "Tell me, Ghost, do you have experience with children? Did you raise little ones in whatever gutter you crawled out of?" Lyra's hands clenched into fists. "I don't remember." "Of course you don't, because there's nothing to remember. You're no one, from nowhere. A creature without a past, without a name, without any right to even breathe the same air as that child." "Lady Sareth." Draven's voice was quiet, but it silenced the noblewoman instantly. His gaze never left Lyra. "What happened when you touched him?" The question caught her off guard. She blinked, her mind racing back to that moment. He stopped crying, immediately. And he looked at me like..." She stopped. How could she say it? How could she tell the Alpha King that his son had looked at her with recognition, with knowing? Like what? Draven leaned forward slightly, and Lyra caught something in his eyes. Not just authority, something else. Desperate hope. Like he knew me, she whispered. The throne room erupted. Voices rose in anger, shock, disbelief. Several courtiers shouted demands for her execution. Others called for her to be investigated, tested, examined for dark magic. The noise swelled like a wave preparing to crash. Enough! Draven's voice didn't rise in volume, but it carried enough power to shake the rafters. Silence fell like a hammer. He stood, descending the steps of the platform with slow, deliberate movements. Each footfall echoed through the vast chamber. The crowd parted before him like water before a ship's prow. He stopped 3 feet from Lyra, towering over her kneeling form. This close, she could see the silver threading through his dark hair, the scars that marked his hands, the way his chest rose and fell with carefully controlled breaths. "Look at me," he commanded. Lyra lifted her head, meeting his eyes. Something passed between them, a jolt of electricity that made her gasp, made his eyes widen fractionally. No. The thought came from somewhere deep, somewhere buried, a memory trying to surface through 6 months of nothing. No, this isn't right. This isn't how... "Do you claim to be the child's mother?" Draven asked, his voice dangerously soft. Every instinct in Lyra's body screamed at her to say no, to back down, to accept her place and beg for mercy. But when she opened her mouth, different words came out. Yes. The throne room exploded again, but Lyra barely heard it. She was too focused on Draven's face, on the way his expression shifted from shock to something darker, something that looked almost like betrayal? Liar! Sereth's shriek cut through the noise. She was suddenly there, her face twisted with rage. You dare stand before the Alpha King and claim to be the mother of his child? The child born to our beloved Queen Mara? You dare dishonor her memory with such a... The child is mine, Lyra said again, stronger this time. She didn't know where the certainty came from, but it flooded through her like molten iron, burning away doubt. I don't know how I know. I don't remember giving birth. I don't remember anything before 6 months ago. But that child is mine, and I feel it in every bone in my body, every beat of my heart. And if you want to kill me for saying it, then do it, but it won't make it less true. The words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. Draven stared at her, his face unreadable. Then, slowly, he turned to one of his advisors, an old man with a long white beard and eyes that had seen too much. Is it possible? The king asked. The advisor hesitated. Sire, the queen... Is it possible? I suppose, in theory, if someone had used powerful magic to alter memories, to create false ones, then perhaps... But, sire, this is a servant, a nobody. The very idea that she could be... Test her, Draven said flatly. The advisor paled. My lord? Blood test, wolf test, memory extraction if needed. Use every method we have. His eyes never left Lyra. If she's lying, we'll know, and if she's not... He didn't finish the sentence. Sereth stepped forward, her voice sharp with panic disguised as outrage. This is absurd! You would entertain the delusions of a mad servant? Grant her legitimacy by testing her claims? My lord, I understand you grieve for the queen, but this is my decision, Draven said coldly, and you would do well to remember your place, Lady Sereth. The threat in his voice was unmistakable. Sereth's mouth snapped shut, but her eyes promised murder as they fixed on Lyra. 2 guards hauled Lyra to her feet. She swayed, her legs weak beneath her, but she forced herself to stand straight. Take her to the holding cells, Draven ordered. No harm comes to her until we have answers. Is that understood? The guards nodded and began leading her away. Lyra's mind raced. What had she done? What had possessed her to claim such an impossible thing? But as they passed the nursery corridor, she heard it again. A soft whimper, quickly soothed, and that ache in her chest returned, gentler now, but undeniable. Mine, her instincts whispered. Yours, something answered back. The holding cells beneath Ironvale were carved from the same black stone as the throne, cold and dark and ancient. They threw Lyra into one without ceremony, the iron door clanging shut with a finality that made her flinch. She was alone. For the first time since this insanity began, she was alone with her thoughts. and they were a mess of confusion and terror and strange, impossible certainty. She sank onto the stone bench that served as a bed, her whole body shaking. What would they do to her? Blood tests, the king had said. Wolf tests. What did that even mean? And what if she was wrong? What if this feeling, this bone-deep certainty, was just madness? A broken mind trying to create meaning where there was none? But the child's eyes, silver like hers, knowing like hers. I know you. Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside her cell. Lyra's head snapped up, expecting guards, expecting the test to begin. But it was Sereth who appeared in the torchlight, flanked by 2 guards wearing her house colors rather than the king's. Her smile was poison and promises. "Hello, little ghost," she purred, her fingers trailing along the bars. "You've made quite the spectacle of yourself tonight. I'm almost impressed." Lyra said nothing, every muscle in her body tensing. Sereth's smile widened. "You really believe it, don't you? That the child is yours. I can see it in your eyes. Such conviction, such certainty." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Want to know a secret?" Lyra's heart hammered in her chest. "You're right." The words hit like a physical blow. Lyra's breath caught, her mind reeling. "Well, partially right," Sereth continued, examining her nails with affected boredom. "The child is yours. You did give birth to him. You are the true mate of the Alpha King, bonded and recognized and all that romantic nonsense." Her eyes lifted, sharp as blades. "But you'll never prove it, because I made very sure of that." What did you do?" "What needed to be done?" Sereth's voice hardened. "You appeared out of nowhere a year ago, already pregnant with the king's child from a mating bond formed during a border negotiation. You threatened everything I'd worked toward. Did you know I was supposed to be his queen? That our families had arranged it? That I'd spent my entire life preparing for that role?" She slammed her hand against the bars, making Lyra jump. "And then you showed up. A nobody from a backwater pack with no political value, no useful connections, no worth whatsoever except that the mating bond chose you, so I fixed it." "Fixed it?" Lyra's voice was hollow. "The spell was expensive, required a blood witch and 3 months of preparation. But it worked beautifully. We crafted false memories of Queen Mara, the perfect bride, the tragic death, the grieving king. We stripped your memories completely and turned you into exactly what you appear to be, nothing." Her smile returned, cruel and satisfied. "And tomorrow, when they test you, they'll find exactly what I want them to find. Because I'm not done yet." Lyra's mind spun. "You're lying. You have to be—" "Am I? Then explain how you know the child is yours. Explain that connection you feel. Explain why he stops crying when you touch him." Sereth straightened, smoothing her dress. "The bond can't be broken completely, little ghost. Not between true mates, and especially not between mother and child. All we could do was bury it. But I knew you'd eventually find your way to him. Your instincts wouldn't allow anything else. So this was all a trap. Yes." Sereth's eyes glittered with triumph. "Tomorrow, you'll be tested. And when those tests come back inconclusive, and they will because I've made sure of it, you'll be declared a fraud, a madwoman, a threat to the crown." She leaned in close, her breath hot against Lyra's face. "And then, my dear ghost, you'll be executed. The king will watch you die, never knowing he's killing his true mate. The child will grow up motherless, and Her smile was radiant with malice. "I will finally take my rightful place as Queen of Iron Vale." Lyra lunged for the bars, but Sereth stepped back with a laugh. "Save your energy. You'll need it for tomorrow's performance." She turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Lyra, even if you somehow manage to convince someone, anyone, of the truth, I have backup plans, contingencies, people loyal to me in every corner of this citadel." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "You've already lost. You just don't know it yet." Her footsteps faded down the corridor, leaving Lyra alone in the darkness with the weight of impossible truth crushing down on her chest. She was the Alpha King's mate. That child was her son. And tomorrow, she was going to die. Unless something stirred in the deepest part of her mind. Not a memory exactly. More like a presence. Ancient, powerful, patient. Not yet, it seemed to say. But soon. Lyra wrapped her arms around herself and waited for dawn. Outside her cell, the citadel slept, unaware that everything was about to change, unaware that the ghost was about to become so much more than they ever imagined. The first test would come at sunrise. But the real test, the one that would shake the foundations of Ironvale itself, was still hours away. In the royal nursery, a baby boy with silver eyes stared at the ceiling and waited for his mother to come back. In the throne room, an alpha king paced before his throne, something nagging at the edges of his carefully constructed memories, something that whispered this was all wrong. And in the holding cells, a forgotten servant named Lyra Vance closed her eyes and felt something wild beginning to wake. Dawn came too fast and too cold. Lyra hadn't slept. How could she? Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Sereth smile, heard that poisoned confession echoing in her skull. You've already lost. You just don't know it yet. The sound of boots on stone pulled her from her thoughts. Multiple sets, heavy, purposeful. The cell door swung open and 4 guards entered. Not the king's men this time, but royal investigators wearing crimson sashes that marked them as truth seekers. The kind who didn't care about rank or politics, only facts. Or at least, that's what they were supposed to be. On your feet, the lead investigator commanded. He was older, gray-haired, with eyes that had seen 1,000 liars and believed none of them. The tests begin now. Lyra stood, her legs unsteady. She'd been sitting on cold stone all night, and her body protested every movement. They didn't give her time to adjust. 2 guards grabbed her arms and hauled her out of the cell, half dragging her down corridors she'd never seen before. They descended deeper into the citadel's bowels, past the holding cells, past the armory, into sections carved so deep into the mountain that the air itself felt different, older, heavier, like it remembered things the surface world had forgotten. Finally, they stopped before a massive iron door marked with symbols that made Lyra's eyes water when she looked at them too long. The lead investigator pressed his palm against the metal, and it swung inward with a groan that sounded almost alive. The chamber beyond was circular, lit by torches that burned with blue-white flames. In the center stood a table carved from a single piece of white stone, its surface etched with more of those eye-watering symbols. Around it stood 5 figures in dark robes, the Citadel's truth weavers, experts in blood magic and memory extraction. And standing against the far wall, arms crossed, face carefully neutral, Draven Kale. Lyra's breath caught. She hadn't expected him to be here, hadn't expected to see those storm-gray eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Bring her forward," one of the truth weavers said, her voice like dry leaves scraping stone. They forced Lyra onto the table, strapping her wrists and ankles with leather that bit into her skin. She tried not to panic, tried to breathe, but her heart was racing so fast she thought it might tear itself apart. "The first test is blood," the elderly truth weaver explained, approaching with a silver knife that gleamed in the strange light. "Blood does not lie. It carries the truth of lineage, of bonds, of connections that cannot be severed by will alone." She pressed the blade against Lyra's palm. The cut was quick and deep, and blood welled up immediately, dark red against pale skin. The truth weaver caught the blood in a crystal vial, then turned to a second table where a similar vial already waited, this one containing blood so bright it almost glowed. "The child's blood," she said simply. She poured both samples into a shallow silver bowl and began chanting in a language Lyra didn't recognize. The words scraped against her ears like broken glass, and the blood in the bowl started to move, swirling together in patterns that defied physics. If Lyra was the child's mother, the blood would recognize itself, would bind together, would prove the connection beyond any doubt. Lyra watched, barely breathing. The blood swirled faster, faster, and then it split apart. The 2 samples separated cleanly, oil and water, refusing to touch. "No bond," the truth weaver announced, her voice flat and final. "The blood rejects the claim." "That's impossible," Lyra gasped. "I felt it. I know." "Blood does not lie," the woman repeated, turning those ancient eyes on her. "Whatever you felt, girl, it was not motherhood." Lyra's mind reeled. How? If Sereth had told the truth, if Lyra really was the mother, then how could the blood test fail? "Because I've made sure of it." Sereth's words came back to her like a slap. The spell, the corruption. She'd said the test would come back inconclusive, that she'd arranged it, that she'd— "Wait," Lyra said desperately. "The test is wrong. Someone tampered with it. Someone—" "The sacred blood rites cannot be tampered with," another truth weaver cut in, his tone sharp with offense. "What you suggest is impossible. These magics are older than the Citadel itself, bound by—" "Then test something else!" Lyra twisted against the straps, ignoring the pain. "You said there were multiple tests. Do them. All of them. Please." The truth weavers exchanged glances. The lead investigator looked to Draven, clearly asking for direction. The Alpha King's face was unreadable, but something flickered in his eyes. "Continue," he said quietly. The next test was worse. They brought out a basin filled with silver water, moon water, they called it, blessed under 100 full moons and capable of showing truth that blood could not. They forced Lyra to drink 3 mouthfuls while they chanted, and the liquid burned, going down like swallowing ice and fire at once. "If you speak lies, the water will know," the truth weaver explained. "It will manifest your deception as poison, and you will suffer for it. If you speak truth, it will remain dormant." Lyra's throat was already burning, her stomach cramping. But she met the woman's eyes and said, voice steady despite the pain, "I am the mother of the Alpha King's child." The water inside her turned to acid. Lyra screamed as agony tore through her body, worse than anything she'd ever felt. It was like being burned from the inside out, like every cell was being shredded and rebuilt wrong. She convulsed against the straps, her back arching, her vision going white. And then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. She collapsed back onto the table, gasping, tears streaming down her face. "The water has judged," the truth weaver said, and there was almost pity in her voice now. "You believe what you say, but belief and truth are not the same thing. The moon water shows us you are deceived, either by madness or by malice, but deceived nonetheless." "No," Lyra whispered. "No, that's not—" But even as she said it, doubt crept in. What if she was wrong? What if this feeling, this certainty, was just a broken mind creating false connections? What if— No, she'd felt it. The child's recognition, the way the pain in her chest vanished when she touched him. That wasn't imagination. That wasn't madness. That was real. "One more test," Draven said suddenly. His voice cut through the room like a blade, silencing the murmuring truth weavers. "The wolf test." Several of them stiffened. "My lord," one began carefully, "that test is dangerous. For someone with no training, no control. I didn't ask for your opinion on its safety. I asked you to perform it." The command was absolute. The truth weavers bowed their heads and began preparing. The wolf test, Lyra learned, was simple in theory and terrifying in practice. They would force her partial transformation, just enough to see if her wolf recognized the child's scent on a piece of cloth taken from his crib. A mother's wolf always knew her pup. Always. They unstrapped her from the table and formed a circle around her, their chanting building to a crescendo that made the air vibrate. Lyra felt something inside her respond, something wild and angry that she'd never fully accessed before. The servant said she had no wolf, that she was broken, incomplete. But as the magic pressed against her, demanding transformation, she felt it stir. And it was massive. The change ripped through her without warning. Not a full shift, just enough for her wolf to surface, but the power of it drove her to her knees. Her hands hit the stone floor, and she felt claws extend, felt her senses sharpen to a painful degree, felt strength flood her muscles. They shoved the cloth at her face. It smelled of milk and innocence and something else. Something that made every instinct in her body scream, "Mine." The word tore through her mind with such force that she lunged for the cloth, a growl ripping from her throat that made 2 of the truth weavers stumble backward. "Hold her!" someone shouted. But Lyra wasn't listening. Her wolf had the scent, and it was all she could do not to tear through these people to get to the source, to get to her. Pain exploded through her body as the truth weavers forced the transformation to reverse. It felt like being turned inside out, and Lyra collapsed, shaking and gasping, her human form restored but her wolf still raging beneath her skin. "Well," Draven's voice was tight, "what did you see?" The lead truth weaver looked shaken. Her wolf recognized the scent, but that proves nothing. Wolves can form attachments to children they've spent time near, even without— She spent no time near him, Draven interrupted. She's been forbidden from the royal wing since she arrived. Last night was the first time she'd ever entered that nursery. Silence fell. Then perhaps— The Truthweaver hesitated. Perhaps there is some other connection. Not motherhood, but enough. Sareth's voice rang out as she swept into the chamber, her timing so perfect it couldn't be coincidence. We've wasted enough time on this farce. 2 tests have failed. The girl is clearly delusional, dangerous, and guilty of assault on the heir. Execute her and be done with it. The king hasn't made that judgment yet, the lead investigator said stiffly. Sareth's smile was sharp. Then perhaps he needs reminding of what's at stake. This creature claims to be the mother of his child, the child born to our beloved Queen Mara. She dishonors the dead. She spreads lies that could destabilize the entire kingdom. And for what? Attention? Madness? Or perhaps something more sinister? She turned to face the assembled truthweavers and investigators, her voice rising with practiced outrage. What if this is an assassination attempt? What if she's been sent by enemies to sow chaos, to make us doubt our own eyes, to weaken us from within? Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Lyra tried to stand, to protest, but her legs wouldn't support her. The transformation had taken too much. She touched the heir, Sareth continued, laid hands on him without permission. Who knows what spells she might have cast, what poison she might have administered. We should be investigating her as a threat, not entertaining her delusions as if they have merit. My son stopped crying when she touched him. Draven's voice was quiet, but it carried. For the first time in 3 months, he was silent, peaceful. Explain that. Sareth didn't miss a beat. Dark magic, obviously. A spell designed to make us believe exactly what we're debating now. My lord, I understand you want answers, but sometimes the simplest explanation is the correct one. This girl is lying. Or you are. The words came from Lyra. She didn't know where she found the strength to speak, but once she started, she couldn't stop. You came to my cell last night. You told me everything, the spell, the false memories, how you stole my place, how you plan to become queen once I'm dead. Sareth's expression flickered, just for a moment, just long enough for Lyra to see the flash of genuine alarm before the mask of outrage snapped back into place. How dare you, Sareth hissed. I visited no cells. I spoke to no prisoners. This is exactly the kind of deranged lie I warned you about, my lord. She's weaving fantasies, trying to drag others down with her. Test her, Lyra said, meeting Draven's eyes. Use your truth magic on her. Ask her if she visited me. Ask her about the Blood Witch. Ask her— That's quite enough. The voice belonged to Lord Crow, Sareth's father, who entered the chamber with 6 armed men at his back. He was a mountain of a man, scarred and cruel-eyed, with the look of someone who'd carved his way to power and wouldn't hesitate to do it again. My daughter is a noble of the highest rank, he continued, his voice a low growl. You will not subject her to tests meant for criminals based on the ravings of a mad servant. Even nobles can be tested, the lead investigator said carefully. If there's credible suspicion— There is no credible suspicion. There is a desperate girl making desperate accusations. Lord Crow stepped closer to Draven, and Lyra saw something pass between them. Not quite a threat, but close. My lord, you know our families have stood together for generations. My loyalty to the crown is absolute, but I will not allow my daughter to be humiliated by this creature. The political calculation was clear on every face in the room. The Crow family was powerful, connected, essential to the kingdom's military strength. Alienating them over a servant with no proof would be suicide. Draven's jaw tightened. Lord Crow— The law is clear, Crow interrupted. She has confessed to assault on the heir. The penalty is death. Carry it out, and we can all move past this unfortunate incident. She hasn't been formally tried, the lead investigator protested weakly. Then try her now. Here. Let's have it done. Crow gestured impatiently. All in favor of execution? Every hand in the room went up except Draven's and the lead investigators. Lyra's blood ran cold. This was it. This was how it ended. Not with proof or justice, but with politics and power crushing truth beneath their boots. Wait. Draven's voice cut through the rising murmur. I invoke sovereign right. The room went silent. Lord Crow's eyes narrowed. My lord? As Alpha King, I have the right to personally investigate any matter concerning my heir. I'm invoking that right now. Draven's gaze swept the room, daring anyone to challenge him. This investigation continues. The girl remains in custody, but she will not be executed until I'm satisfied we have the full truth. With respect, sire, Sareth said, her voice honey-sweet and poisonous. How long will that take? Days, weeks? Meanwhile, this creature spreads her lies, undermines the memory of our queen, and poses a continued threat to 3 days, Draven said flatly. I'll have my answers in 3 days. Lord Crow's face darkened. And if you don't? Then I'll carry out the execution myself. The promise hung in the air like a blade. Lyra should have felt relief. 3 more days meant 3 more chances to prove the truth. But looking at Draven's face, at the careful blankness in his eyes, she realized something terrible. He didn't believe her. Whatever he was doing, whatever game he was playing, it wasn't about saving her. It was about something else, something political or strategic that she couldn't see. Very well, Lord Crow said after a long moment. 3 days. But she remains under heavy guard, and if she makes one more wild accusation against my family, sovereign right or not, I'll demand immediate justice. Agreed, Draven nodded to the guards. Take her back to her cell. Double the watch. No one enters or leaves without my express permission. They hauled Lyra to her feet. She tried to catch Draven's eye, tried to find some hint of what he was thinking, but he'd already turned away, his attention on the truth weavers. Dismissed, he said. All of you. As they dragged her from the chamber, Lyra caught one last glimpse of Sareth. The noblewoman was smiling, small and satisfied. 3 days, that smile said. I only need 3 days to destroy you completely. The cell felt smaller when they threw her back in. Colder. More final. Lyra sank onto the stone bench and pressed her hands against her face. 3 days. What could she possibly do in 3 days? She had no proof, no allies, no footsteps. She looked up to find Draven standing outside her cell, alone. No guards, no witnesses. Her heart lurched. You shouldn't be here, she said, her voice hoarse. If they see you, they won't. He gripped the bars, his knuckles white. I need you to tell me the truth. No games, no politics. Just truth. I did tell you the truth. Did you? It wasn't a question. His eyes searched her face, looking for cracks, for lies. The tests failed, every single one. If you were really my mate, if that child was really yours, the magic would have shown it. Blood doesn't lie. The moon water doesn't lie. So either you're delusional, or you're a very good liar, or someone powerful enough corrupted the tests. Lyra stood, moving as close to the bars as she dared. I know how insane that sounds. I know you have no reason to believe me. But Sareth told me everything last night. She admitted it. She said she used a blood witch to create false memories, to make everyone believe Queen Mara existed when she didn't. Mara did exist, Draven said harshly. I remember her. I remember our wedding. I remember... Do you? Lyra interrupted. Really? Or do you remember being told you remember? Have you ever tried to recall specific details? Real conversations? Moments that feel genuine instead of... She stopped because his face had gone white. What? She pressed. What is it? Nothing, he said, but his voice had lost its certainty. It's just, sometimes when I try to remember her, it's like looking through fog. I assumed it was grief, or it's the spell. Lyra gripped the bars from her side, so close now their fingers were almost touching. They didn't just erase my memories. They implanted false ones in everyone. Made you all believe in a queen who never existed, a marriage that never happened, a... Stop! Draven pulled back, shaking his head. This is madness. You're asking me to believe that my entire court, my entire kingdom, has been living a lie for months? That no one noticed? That no one questioned? Magic that powerful doesn't leave room for questions, Lyra said desperately. And Sareth is smart. She built the lie around truth. You needed a mate. She was the political choice. So when the official story said you married someone else and then tragically lost her, everyone just accepted it. Because it made sense. Because questioning it would mean questioning everything. Draven stared at her for a long moment. Then, quietly, Why should I believe you? A servant with no past, no proof, no, because you feel it too. The words were barely a whisper, but they hit like thunder. I see it in your eyes when you look at me, Lyra continued. You feel the pull, the recognition, the bond trying to surface through whatever spell is suppressing it. Why else would you invoke sovereign right? Why else would you give me 3 days when every political instinct says to just execute me and move on? His silence was answer enough. I don't remember you, she admitted. I don't remember us meeting or falling in love or anything, but I feel it. Like a hook in my chest pulling me toward you, toward our son. And I think if you really tried to break through the false memories, you'd feel it too. Draven's hand moved to his chest, almost unconsciously, pressing against the same spot where Lyra always felt that ache. Even if what you say is true, he said finally, I can't just accuse the Crow family of treason based on feelings. I need proof, real, tangible proof. And in 3 days, I'll find it. Lyra didn't know how, didn't have a plan, but the certainty in her voice surprised even her. Give me a chance. That's all I'm asking. Don't execute me at dawn. Give me... A scream tore through the citadel, high, terrified, coming from somewhere above them. Draven's head snapped up, his entire body going rigid. That's... Another scream, cut off abruptly. Then the howling started. Not the healthy howls of shifted wolves, but something wrong, something twisted and in agony. The nursery! Draven was already moving, sprinting down the corridor, leaving Lyra behind. Wait! She grabbed the bars, shaking them uselessly. Let me out! If something's happening to him, let me out! But he was gone, and she was trapped. The howling intensified. More screams joined it, the sound of running feet, of shouted orders, of chaos spreading through the citadel like wildfire. And beneath it all, cutting through every other noise like a knife through silk, the baby's crying, not the usual screams of discomfort. This was pure terror. Lyra's vision went red. That wild thing inside her, the one that had stirred during the wolf test, surged forward with such force that she staggered. Our child is in danger. The thought came in a voice that wasn't quite hers. Older, fiercer. Our mate cannot protect him alone. I'm locked in, Lyra snarled at the bars, at the stone, at the entire fucking citadel. I can't. You are more than they know, more than they allowed you to remember. So remember. The command hit like a physical blow, and suddenly Lyra's mind was filled with images that couldn't be hers but were. Running through forests with silver eyes blazing, fighting beside warriors twice her size and winning, standing before a pack and having them bow, not because she demanded it, but because they couldn't do anything else. Being powerful, being someone who mattered, being the white wolf. The title meant nothing to her conscious mind, but her body knew it, her wolf knew it, and that knowledge was enough. Lyra gripped the iron bars with both hands. They were thick as her wrist, forged by master smiths, designed to hold even the strongest wolves. She ripped them out of the stone like they were made of wet paper. The metal shrieked in protest, the stone cracked, and Lyra stepped through the destroyed doorway, her eyes blazing silver, her body thrumming with power she didn't understand but couldn't deny. Guards appeared at the end of the corridor, weapons drawn. Get back in! What the hell? They stared at the destroyed cell, then at Lyra, who stood wreathed in power that made the torches flicker and the very air vibrate. Move, she said quietly. They didn't move fast enough. Lyra moved, crossing 20 feet in the space between heartbeats. She didn't fully shift, couldn't afford the time, but her hands were clawed and her strength was inhuman as she batted aside weapons like toys and threw bodies against walls hard enough to crack stone. She didn't kill them. Some part of her that was still Lyra the servant recoiled at that, but she didn't have to kill them to get through them. Within seconds, the corridor was clear, and she was running. The citadel was in chaos. Whatever was happening in the nursery had spread alarm through the entire structure. Servants fled screaming, guards rushed toward the royal wing, and through it all, that terrible crying continued. Lyra ran faster than she'd ever run, her body responding to instincts she didn't know she had. Corners that should have slowed her down, she took at full speed, somehow knowing exactly where to step. Stairs she climbed 4 at a time. Guards who tried to stop her she avoided or disabled with brutal efficiency. She reached the nursery wing to find absolute carnage. The door had been blown off its hinges. Scorch marks scarred the walls. 3 guards lay unconscious, or worse, scattered across the hallway. And the smell. Blood. Magic. And something else. Something rotting and wrong. Lyra burst through the doorway into hell. The nursery was a battlefield. Draven stood in the center, partially shifted, his wolf form massive and terrifying as he faced off against... Lyra's mind struggled to process what she was seeing. It looked like a man, but wrong. Twisted. His skin was gray and mottled, his eyes completely black, his fingers elongated into claws that dripped with something dark and viscous. Dark magic radiated from him in waves that made Lyra's stomach heave. A summoned creature. A demon-touched thing that shouldn't exist in their world. And it was reaching for the cradle. No! The word tore from Lyra's throat as she launched herself at the creature. It turned toward her, surprised, and in that moment of distraction, Draven struck. His massive jaws closed around the thing's arm, tearing through unnatural flesh with a sickening crunch. The creature shrieked, a sound that belonged in nightmares, and flung Draven across the room. The Alpha King hit the wall hard enough to crack stone and slid to the floor, stunned. Lyra was already there, putting herself between the monster and her son. Her hands were fully clawed now, silver light pouring from her eyes, and when she growled, the windows rattled. Touch him and die. The creature laughed, the sound like breaking bones. Foolish girl, you don't even know what you are, what you could be. But it doesn't matter. The child dies tonight, and there's nothing you can... Lyra hit it with everything she had. The impact sent them both crashing through the far wall, through the corridor beyond, through another wall, and finally out into the open air of the courtyard 3 stories down. They landed in the snow, and Lyra was on her feet instantly, her body screaming with pain but her wolf howling for blood. The creature rose more slowly, dark ichor leaking from wounds that should have been fatal. Impressive, it hissed. But you're still just a broken little servant playing at... Lyra's fist caved in its face before it could finish. They fought in the snow, brutal and vicious, and Lyra felt her control slipping. The wolf wanted out, wanted to fully shift and tear this thing apart with proper fangs and claws. But something held her back. Some instinct that whispered if she shifted now, here, in front of everyone who was gathering in windows and doorways to watch, she'd reveal too much, become too much of a target. So she fought human, or mostly human, and it was enough. The creature was strong, fast, empowered by dark magic that should have given it every advantage. But Lyra had rage, had desperation, had a mother's fury at something threatening her child. And that made all the difference. She caught its arm mid-strike, twisted and felt bones snap. It screamed and lashed out with its other hand, claws raking across her ribs and drawing blood. Lyra ignored the pain and drove her knee into its stomach, then its face, then its throat. It went down hard. Before it could rise, Lyra was on top of it, her hands around its neck, squeezing with strength that surprised even her. "Who sent you?" she snarled. "Who?" The creature smiled through broken teeth. "You're too late. The plan is already in motion. 3 days, little wolf. That's all you have. And when the real attack comes..." It convulsed, black blood pouring from its mouth and eyes, a kill switch, a spell to prevent interrogation. Within seconds, the thing dissolved into ash and dark smoke that the wind scattered across the snow. Lyra knelt there, breathing hard, her hand still clenched where the creature's neck had been. Around her, the courtyard was silent. Dozens of witnesses stared at her, the ghost, the servant, the girl who'd just destroyed something most of them couldn't even name. Footsteps crunched in the snow behind her. "Stand down!" Draven's voice was rough, likely from being thrown into a wall. "All of you, stand down. She's not the threat." Lyra turned to find him approaching, human form restored but barely, his clothes torn and his face bruised. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, understanding maybe, or the beginning of it. "The baby," Lyra gasped. "Is he..." "Safe. Frightened, but safe." Draven extended a hand. After a moment's hesitation, Lyra took it. He pulled her to her feet and she swayed, the adrenaline finally wearing off and leaving her aware of every injury, every strain, every bone-deep exhaustion. "You broke out of your cell," he said quietly. "Destroyed it, actually. Injured my guards. Violated direct orders." I heard him crying, Lyra replied, too tired to be afraid. I couldn't. I had to. I know. His hand was still holding hers. I know. Before either could say more, Lord Crow's voice boomed across the courtyard. Seize her. She's in league with that creature. She must be. She appeared just as it attacked. She saved my son's life, Draven cut in, his voice cold as winter itself. While you were nowhere to be found. I was securing the lower levels, ensuring, where is your daughter? The question landed like a bomb. Lord Crow's face went carefully blank. Sereth is in her chambers, as any wise person would be during an attack. What are you implying? I'm implying that a demon-touched assassin appeared in my son's nursery mere hours after this girl was imprisoned. An attack that, had it succeeded, would have eliminated the heir and left the throne vulnerable. Draven's eyes narrowed. Convenient timing, wouldn't you say? The assembled crowd murmured. Lyra saw the calculation happening in real time, suspicion spreading, allegiances shifting. But Lord Crow was a survivor. He'd navigated court politics for decades and wasn't about to be outmaneuvered by implication. Convenient for whom, my lord? He asked smoothly. If you're suggesting my family had anything to do with this attack, I demand you present evidence. Immediately. Draven's jaw tightened. He had no evidence, just suspicion and the word of a servant no one trusted. Into the silence, a new voice rang out. I have evidence. Everyone turned to see the elderly truth weaver from the testing chamber approaching, her face grim. Lady Sereth visited the holding cells last night, she said clearly. I witnessed it myself. She bribed the guards and spoke with the prisoner for approximately 10 minutes. Sereth appeared in a window above, her face a mask of outrage. That's a lie. I was nowhere near. I also found traces of corrupted magic on the testing equipment. The truth weaver cut through Sereth's protests like they were air. Someone tampered with the blood rites. Someone with access to very dark, very expensive magic. The courtyard erupted. Lyra's head spun. An ally. She had an ally, but why would a truth weaver risk everything to... The old woman met her eyes and gave the smallest nod, then mouthed 2 words. White wolf. Before Lyra could process that, Lord Crow made his move. Treason, he declared, his voice cutting through the chaos. You accuse my daughter of treason based on the testimony of one woman? One truth weaver who could easily be bought or compromised? I will not stand for... Then let's settle this properly. Draven's voice rang with authority that silenced everyone. Trial by combat. Ancient law. If Lady Sereth is innocent, let her prove it in the circle. If she's guilty, let justice be served. Sereth's face went white. You can't be serious. Trial by combat is barbaric, outdated. It's law, Draven said flatly. Do you accept, or do you refuse and accept guilt by default? Trapped. Sereth was completely trapped, and everyone knew it. Refusing would confirm her guilt, but accepting meant... She'll need a champion, Lord Crow said quickly. She's a noble woman, not a warrior. I'll fight in her place. No. The word came from Lyra, surprising everyone, including herself. If this is about me, about my claim, then I'll be her opponent. Sereth's smile returned, sharp and vicious. Perfect. I accept. And I'll fight myself. No champions needed. This should be quick. Because Sereth was a trained warrior from a powerful family, and Lyra was supposedly just a broken servant. They'd know the truth soon enough. Tomorrow at dawn, Draven declared, in the combat circle, witnessed by the full court. Winner takes truth, loser takes death. He turned to Lyra, and his expression was unreadable. Until then, you're confined to guest quarters under guard. Try not to destroy those too. Was that humor? In a situation this dire? Lyra was too exhausted to tell. They led her away, not to the cells this time, but to an actual room with an actual bed and guards who looked at her with something closer to respect than contempt. As the door closed, Lyra collapsed onto the bed and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow, she'd fight Sereth. Tomorrow, she'd prove the truth or die trying. But tonight, her son was safe. And somehow, impossibly, the Alpha King was starting to believe her. She closed her eyes and felt that hook in her chest, the bond trying to surface. Hold on, she thought, sending the feeling toward wherever Draven was in this massive citadel. Just a little longer. Tomorrow would bring battle, blood. And finally, truth. Sleep didn't come. Lyra lay in the guest quarters, staring at shadows dancing on the ceiling, her body screaming with injuries she barely remembered getting. Every breath hurt. Every movement sent fire through her ribs where the creature's claws had opened her up. But pain was nothing compared to the noise in her head. White Wolf. The old truth weaver had mouthed those words like they meant something, like they explained everything, but they explained nothing. Lyra rolled onto her side, wincing, and stared at her hands. They looked normal now, pale, calloused from months of scrubbing floors, fingernails ragged. But she'd seen them transformed, had felt claws extend and strength flood her muscles like lightning through water. She'd torn iron bars out of solid stone. She'd fought a demon-touched thing and won. That wasn't normal. Even for a wolf, that wasn't normal. The door opened without warning. Lyra was on her feet instantly, ignoring the pain, her body tensing for a fight. But it was just the elderly truth weaver from the courtyard, slipping inside with surprising stealth for someone her age. She closed the door quietly and turned to face Lyra with eyes that held centuries of secrets. "Sit," she said simply, "before you fall over." Lyra didn't sit. "Who are you? Why did you help me?" "My name is Elder Mira, and I helped you because I made a vow 70 years ago to protect the White Wolf bloodline, no matter the cost." She moved to the window, peering out at the pre-dawn darkness. "I never thought I'd live to see that vow tested, but here we are. I don't understand. What bloodline? What—" "Your mother was Sienna Vance, last of the White Wolf line, the most powerful alpha bloodline in wolf history, extinct for 3 generations until you were born." Mira turned, and her expression was grave. "They killed your family when you were just a child, hunted them across 3 territories, burned them out, slaughtered them one by one. You were the only survivor." The words hit like physical blows. Lyra's legs gave out, and she sat heavily on the bed. "That's not— I don't remember." "Of course you don't. Your mother had a seer hide your memories, suppress your power, make you forgettable so you could survive. It was supposed to be temporary, just until the threat passed." Mira's voice softened. "But the seer was killed before she could undo it. You've been living with those suppressions your entire life, buried so deep even Sereth's spell couldn't touch them." Lyra's mind reeled. "Then how— the bond?" Mira sat beside her, her ancient hands surprisingly gentle. "When you met Draven, when you mated, when you carried his child, each event cracked the suppressions a little. And then Sereth tried to erase you completely, and the conflict between her spell and your mother's protections shattered both. That's why your memories are gone. Why you woke up blank 6 months ago. The spells destroyed each other, and you've been slowly rebuilding from nothing." It made a terrible kind of sense. Lyra pressed her hands to her face, trying to process it all. "If I'm this White Wolf, why didn't my power come back before now?" "Because power needs belief, needs identity. You've spent months thinking you're nothing, believing you're nothing, and that belief was its own prison." Mira's eyes gleamed. "But tonight, when you heard your child in danger, when you felt that primal need to protect, belief didn't matter anymore. Instinct took over, and instinct knows exactly what you are." Lyra looked at her hands again, remembering the feel of iron crumpling beneath her grip. "What am I?" "The only creature in 3 centuries powerful enough to challenge an alpha king and win. The only wolf who could unite the fractured packs under a banner of real strength rather than political marriage." Mira leaned closer. "And that's exactly why they tried to kill your bloodline. Why Sereth tried to erase you. Because a white wolf doesn't just join the hierarchy, she stands above it." The implications crashed through Lyra like avalanches. "Sereth knew. That's why she went after me specifically. She knew what I was, even if I didn't." "Not knew, suspected. Your scent probably triggered something in her family's old records. The Crows have been exterminating powerful bloodlines for generations. It's how they climbed to their current position. When you showed up already pregnant with the king's child, already mate bonded, she couldn't risk you remembering what you were, so she tried to bury you completely. But I'm remembering now. Lyra felt something fierce building in her chest. Every time I fight, every time I shift, more comes back. Not memories exactly, but knowledge, Mira finished. Your wolf knows, and she's trying to teach you, if you'll listen. Lyra stood, pacing despite the pain. Tomorrow I fight Sereth, in front of the entire court. If I shift, if I show what I really am, they'll either bow or try to kill you. Probably both. Mira's smile was grim. The crows won't let you live if they see the truth. They'll call you a threat, claim you're here to conquer, rally the other families against you. It could mean civil war. And if I don't shift? If I fight human? Sereth's been training her whole life. She's good, better than good. You might win on rage and desperation, but it's not guaranteed. Mira stood, moving to the door. The choice is yours. Hide what you are and maybe die. Or reveal yourself and definitely become a target. Some choice. The only one you have. Mira paused at the door. For what it's worth, your mother would be proud. You've survived things that would have broken lesser wolves, and you're about to do something incredibly stupid for people who don't even remember you exist. Her smile turned genuine. That's very white wolf of you. She left before Lyra could respond. Alone again, Lyra sank onto the bed and tried to quiet the storm in her mind. White wolf, bloodline, power. It was too much, too fast, and she had hours, maybe less, before she had to face Sereth in a fight that would determine everything. She closed her eyes and reached inside, searching for that wild presence she'd felt before, that ancient, patient thing that had told her to remember. Are you there? She thought into the darkness of her own mind. Silence. Then, slowly, a response that was more feeling than words. Always. What do I do? What you were born to do. Survive. Protect. Win. But how? Stop thinking. Start being. The presence receded, leaving Lyra alone with advice that was simultaneously useless and everything she needed. Stop thinking. Start being. She could do that. She had to. Outside, the first gray light of dawn was breaking over Ironvale's peaks. Time was up. The combat circle sat in the center of Ironvale's main courtyard, a ring of ancient stones carved with symbols meant to contain magic and death in equal measure. By the time they brought Lyra out, half the citadel had gathered to watch. Not just the nobility, everyone. Servants pressed against windows, guards lined the walls. Even common folk from the lower city had somehow gotten word and crowded the gates, desperate for a glimpse of whatever was about to happen. Lyra walked through the crowd in borrowed clothes, simple leather pants and a tunic, nothing fancy, but at least they fit. The guards flanking her weren't rough this time. One even murmured good luck as they reached the circle's edge. Across the ring, Sereth waited. She looked every inch the warrior princess in custom armor that probably cost more than Lyra's entire village had made in a year. Silver and black, perfectly fitted, designed to protect while allowing full range of motion. Her hair was braided back in intricate patterns, her face painted with her house symbols. She looked ready for war. Lyra looked like exactly what she was, a half-dead servant about to fight way above her weight class. The crowd's murmuring made that clear. Bets were being placed, and they weren't in Lyra's favor. You can still back out, Draven said quietly from beside her. Lyra hadn't noticed him approach. She turned to find the Alpha King studying her with an expression she couldn't read. Concern? Calculation? Something else? And accept guilt? She asked. And live. His voice dropped lower. I could exile you instead. Send you away with enough gold to start over somewhere else. You'd be alive. Without my son, without... She stopped herself. Without you. She'd almost said without you, which was insane because she didn't even know him, didn't remember him, had no reason to feel this pull toward a man who'd almost executed her yesterday. Except she did feel it, growing stronger by the hour. Draven's jaw tightened. Last night, when you fought that thing, I felt something, like a string pulling tight in my chest, connecting me to you. I've been trying to convince myself it was just adrenaline, just the chaos of the moment, but it's the bond, Lyra said simply, trying to surface through Sereth's spell. You feel it too. That's impossible. I was bonded to Mara. I remember... Do you? Really? She grabbed his arm, desperate to make him understand. Or do you remember being told you should remember? Close your eyes. Right now. Picture Mara's face. He stared at her like she'd lost her mind. But after a moment, he closed his eyes. Lyra watched his expression shift from certainty to confusion to something that looked like fear. I can't, he whispered. I can see something, but it's not solid. It's like she's behind frosted glass, and the harder I try to focus. He opened his eyes, and Lyra saw belief warring with denial. Now picture my face, she said. I don't need to picture it. You're standing right. Close your eyes and picture it anyway. He did, and this time his expression cleared almost immediately. I see you, clearly, like you're burned into... He stopped, his eyes flying open. What did you do to me? Nothing. That's the bond. Lyra released his arm. Real bonds don't need memory to exist, they just are. Sareth can bury them, but she can't break them. Not completely. Before Draven could respond, Lord Crow's voice boomed across the courtyard. Enough delay. Let's begin this farce so we can get back to reality. The crowd roared approval. They wanted blood, wanted spectacle, wanted anything to break the monotony of winter in a frozen citadel. Lyra stepped into the circle. Sareth was already there, stretching like a cat, confidence radiating from every movement. When she saw Lyra, her smile was all teeth. I'm almost sad about this, she called across the circle. You've been such good entertainment, but all shows must end. Funny, Lyra replied, moving to her mark. I was thinking the same thing. The officiator, an ancient warrior with more scars than face, stepped between them. Rules are simple. Fight until one yields or dies. No weapons except what you're born with. No interference from outside the circle. No mercy. He looked at each of them in turn. Understood? Perfectly, Sareth purred. Lyra just nodded. The officiator raised his hand. The crowd fell silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Begin! Sareth moved like lightning. She closed the distance in a heartbeat. Her first strike aimed at Lyra's throat. A killing blow right out of the gate. No testing, no feeling out her opponent. Just instant lethal force. Lyra twisted aside on pure instinct, felt the air whistle past her neck where Sareth's claws would have torn out her windpipe. She countered with a low kick that Sareth jumped over easily, and suddenly they were both moving, circling, testing. The crowd roared. You're fast, Sareth admitted, her eyes glowing gold with her wolf's presence. I'll give you that, but fast won't save you. She attacked again, a flurry of strikes that drove Lyra backward. Claws raked across Lyra's shoulder, drawing blood. A knee caught her ribs, the same ribs already cracked from last night, and Lyra gasped in pain. Sareth pressed the advantage, her training evident in every movement. She fought like water, flowing from one technique to the next, never committing too much, never leaving an opening. Lyra fought like a brawler. No technique, no finesse, just survival instinct and rage. It wasn't enough. Another strike got through, claws tearing across Lyra's thigh. She stumbled, her legs suddenly unreliable, and Sareth's smile widened. Is this the great threat I was supposed to fear? She taunted, circling. You can barely stand. Lyra spat blood. I'm still standing. That's more than your demon friend managed. Sareth's expression flickered, just for a second, just enough to confirm what Lyra suspected. You sent it, Lyra said, her voice carrying to the crowd. The creature last night. You sent it to kill your own king's heir. Prove it, Sareth shot back. Oh, wait, you can't, because you're about to die. She lunged again, and this time Lyra didn't dodge fast enough. Claws sank into her side, puncturing deep, and Lyra screamed as Sareth twisted them viciously. Should have stayed in your cell, little ghost, Sareth whispered, close enough that only Lyra could hear. Should have died quietly. Now you get to die screaming while everyone watches. She ripped her claws free, and Lyra collapsed to her knees, blood pouring from the wound. The crowd's roar was deafening. They thought it was over. Even Draven had moved to the circle's edge, his face carved from ice, but his eyes betraying him. He thought she was done. They all thought she was done. Lyra pressed her hand to the wound, felt blood pump between her fingers, felt her vision starting to blur, and felt that presence inside her stir. Enough playing. The voice wasn't her own, wasn't even fully internal. It resonated through her bones, her blood, her soul. They want a show? Give them one. No, Lyra gasped. If I shift, if they see, let them see. Let them all see what it means to threaten a white wolf's child. Sereth was circling, playing to the crowd, savoring her victory. Any last words, Ghost? Lyra lifted her head, met Sereth's eyes, and smiled through blood-stained teeth. Just one. Duck. Sereth's confusion lasted exactly as long as it took for Lyra to let go. The transformation hit like an explosion. Not the partial shift from last night, not the careful, controlled change that kept her mostly human. This was total, complete. The white wolf breaking free after decades of suppression, after months of denial, after hours of being beaten and broken and told she was nothing. Power erupted from Lyra's body in a shockwave that sent Sereth flying backward and cracked several of the circle's containment stones. The crowd screamed and scrambled away as magic thick enough to taste flooded the courtyard. And in the center of it all, where Lyra had been kneeling, now stood a wolf. Not just any wolf. She was massive, easily twice the size of even the largest alpha, her shoulders level with a tall man's chest. Her fur was pure white, so bright it seemed to generate its own light. Her eyes blazed silver like twin stars, and when she threw back her head and howled, the sound shook the citadel to its foundations. Every wolf in Ironvale, shifted or not, dropped to their knees. They couldn't help it. The dominance radiating from the white wolf was absolute, primal, undeniable. It bypassed conscious thought and spoke directly to their wolves, to that ancient part of them that recognized hierarchy without question. Even Draven went down, his eyes wide with shock and something else. Recognition. Finally, fully, completely. Recognition. Only one person remained standing. Sereth, braced against the circle's edge, her face twisted with hate and terror in equal measure. No, no, you're supposed to be dead. Your whole line is supposed to be... Lyra, the white wolf, moved. She crossed the circle in 2 bounds, and suddenly Sereth wasn't a skilled warrior anymore. She was prey, and she knew it. Sereth shifted desperately, her own wolf form emerging, beautiful and deadly, and absolutely insignificant compared to what faced her. They clashed in the center of the circle. It wasn't a fight, it was an execution. The white wolf was faster, stronger, and driven by months of suppressed rage. She caught Sereth's throat in her jaws and lifted, slamming the smaller wolf into the ground, hard enough to crater stone. Sereth yelped and thrashed, trying to break free, but it was like trying to escape gravity. Lyra could end it. One bite, one twist. Sereth would be dead and all her lies would die with her. But dead people couldn't confess. The white wolf released Sereth's throat and shifted back to human in a ripple of power that left her standing over her enemy, naked and covered in blood, but radiating such dominance that no one dared look away. "Shift back," Lyra commanded, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Now!" Sereth shifted, coughing blood, her armor torn and useless. You can't. Confess." Lyra's eyes blazed. "Tell them what you did. The spell, the fake queen, the demon you sent, all of it." I won't." Lyra's hand shot out, gripping Sereth's throat. Not enough to kill, just enough to make breathing difficult. "You told me everything in my cell because you thought I'd be dead before I could repeat it. But I'm not dead. I'm right here. And you're going to tell them, or I'm going to rip the truth out of your mind piece by piece until there's nothing left." It was a bluff. Lyra had no idea how to do that, but her wolf sold it with absolute conviction. Sereth's eyes darted to her father, desperate for rescue. But Lord Crow was on his knees like everyone else, held down by dominance he couldn't fight. "Fine," Sereth choked out. "Fine. Yes, I cast the spell. Yes, I created the false memories of Queen Mara. Yes, I tried to erase you because you were his real mate, and I couldn't let you." Her voice broke into sobs. Real or performed, Lyra couldn't tell. "The demon," Lyra pressed. "Father hired the Blood Witch, the same one who helped with the memory spell. He said the child was a loose end. That even without you, even with the false history, the boy would eventually threaten my claim to—" "Enough!" Lord Crow's roar cut through the courtyard. He surged to his feet, somehow fighting through the dominance, his face purple with rage. You believe this creature? This abomination? She's using dark magic to force a confession. This proves nothing. It proves everything. Draven's voice was quiet, but it carried. He stood now too, his eyes locked on Lyra with an expression that made her chest ache. I remember now. All of it. Meeting you at the border negotiations, the instant bond, bringing you here, planning our future, and then nothing. Just fog. Just Mara, who never existed. He turned to Lord Crow, and his face was a mask of cold fury. You helped them. You knew what they were doing, and you helped them because you thought it would give you power through your daughter. You have no proof. I have a confession from his daughter, Draven gestured to Sereth. I have a demon attack that came from nowhere. I have Truthweaver testimony about corrupted tests. And I have this. He held up his hand, and Lyra saw something she'd missed before. A thin silver thread visible only to wolves, stretching from his palm across the distance to her own hand. The mate bond. Fully manifest now that the spell was breaking. The crowd saw it too. Gasps and whispers spread like wildfire. That's my mate, Draven said, his voice ringing with absolute certainty. Mother of my child, true queen of Ironvale, and you tried to erase her. Lord Crow's hand moved to his sword. This is madness. The law states that attacking the Alpha King's mate is treason, punishable by death. Draven's own hand went to his blade. Choose your next move very carefully, Crow. For a long moment, the courtyard held its breath. Then Lord Crow smiled. It was the smile of a man who'd already accepted his loss and decided to burn everything on his way down. Very well. If it's war you want. He drew his sword and drove it not at Draven, but at the ground. The steel hit stone with a sound like breaking crystal, and suddenly the entire courtyard was screaming, because Lord Crow hadn't struck the ground. He'd struck a ward stone, one of the ancient markers that held Ironvale's defensive magics in place, and he'd shattered it. The protective dome that had shielded the citadel for 3 centuries flickered and died like a candle in the wind, and beyond the walls a horn sounded, then another, and another. An army's worth of horns. Lyra stared in horror as thousands of torches appeared on the mountainside, an invasion force that must have been moving into position for days, hidden by magic and terrain, waiting for this exact moment. You didn't think this was just about succession, did you? Lord Crow laughed, the sound edged with madness. This was always about conquest. My daughter on the throne, my grandson as heir, and my army to ensure compliance. You were supposed to execute the girl yourself, Draven. You were supposed to make this easy. He gestured to the approaching army. But since you've chosen the hard way, so be it. My forces outnumber yours 3-1. They have mages, siege weapons, and most importantly, they have conviction. Draven's face went pale. You'd attack your own kingdom? Slaughter your own people? They're not my people. They're subjects who need to learn their place. Crow's smile widened. Surrender now, step down peacefully, and I'll let you live. You can even keep the girl. Take her back to whatever backwater she came from and play house. But Ironvale is mine. Never. The word came from Lyra. She stepped forward, still covered in blood, still radiating power that made the very air shimmer. You want Ironvale? You'll have to go through me first. Crow's laugh was genuine. You? One wolf, no matter how powerful, against 3,000 soldiers. You're brave, I'll give you that. Stupid, but brave. Not one wolf. Lyra turned to the crowd. The servants, the guards, the common folk pressed against the gates. Every wolf in the citadel just felt what I am, felt the bond form between me and your king. You know the truth now. The question is, what are you going to do about it? For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then a young guard, one of the ones who'd whispered good luck earlier, stepped forward. I'll fight. And I, one of the kitchen girls who used to call Lyra Ghost. Me too. A stable hand, a blacksmith, a nursemaid. One by one, wolves stepped forward. Not the nobility, they were still calculating, still watching. But the working wolves, the forgotten ones, the ones who understood what it meant to be dismissed and erased. They stepped forward and knelt before their true queen. Within minutes, hundreds had joined them. It wasn't enough. Nowhere near enough against Crow's army. But it was something. Lyra turned back to Crow. Last chance. Call them off. Face justice for your crimes, or die with them when they reach these walls. Bold words from someone who's going to be dead within the hour. Crow raised his sword in signal. Advance! The army began moving down the mountain. Draven was suddenly at Lyra's side, his hand finding hers. The bond thrummed between them, strong and real, and impossible to deny now. I'm sorry, he said quietly, for not believing you, for not remembering, for... Save it. Lyra squeezed his hand. We survived this first. Then you can apologize properly. His smile was brief but genuine. Deal. Together they turned to face the approaching army. 3,000 soldiers against maybe 500 defenders. Terrible odds. Impossible odds. But Lyra was the White Wolf, and impossible was just another word for Tuesday. One thing, she said to Draven, when this is over, when we win. When? He raised an eyebrow. When, she confirmed. I get to hold my son. No guards. No barriers. Just me and him. Agreed? Draven's throat worked. Agreed. The army was close now, close enough to see individual faces. Close enough to smell their bloodlust. Lyra felt her wolf stir, eager for the fight. Ready? She asked it. Always, it replied. She took a breath, let it out, and transformed. The White Wolf emerged again in a blaze of silver light, and this time she didn't stop at just herself. The bond with Draven, now fully active, amplified her power. She felt it surge through him, felt his own transformation become stronger, faster, more complete. They shifted together, two massive wolves standing side by side at the top of Ironvale's main courtyard, and behind them, hundreds more wolves answered the call. The army hit the gates like a tidal wave. But tidal waves broke against mountains, and the White Wolf was about to teach them what it meant to challenge something ancient, powerful, and absolutely done with being underestimated. The battle for Ironvale had begun. The first wave hit the gates like thunder made flesh. Crow's soldiers came in formation, disciplined, trained, 3,000 strong against Ironvale's shattered defenses. They carried siege ladders, battering rams, and enough weapons to arm a small kingdom. Behind them, mages stood in robes marked with symbols that made the air itself recoil. The gates held for exactly 12 seconds. Then the battering ram, enchanted with magic that made it hit like a meteorite, smashed through reinforced oak and iron as if they were paper. The entrance exploded inward in a shower of splinters and twisted metal. Crow's army roared and surged forward. They made it exactly 10 feet before the White Wolf hit them. Lyra moved like a force of nature given teeth and claws. She was faster than anything her size had a right to be, her massive form blurring as she tore through the front line. Soldiers scattered, some brave enough to stand their ground, most smart enough to run. The brave ones died first. Her jaws closed around a soldier's shield, solid steel, reinforced with wards, and crushed it like tinfoil. The man behind it screamed and tried to run. He didn't make it 3 steps before Draven's massive black wolf took him down. The Alpha King fought like a demon beside his mate, their movements synchronized in a way that came from instinct rather than practice. Where Lyra was raw power and devastating force, Draven was precision and lethal efficiency. Together they formed a wall of fur and fury that the army couldn't breach, but even unstoppable forces could be overwhelmed by sheer numbers. "Fall back," someone in the army shouted. "Mages forward! Bring her down!" 6 robed figures pushed through the chaos, their hands already glowing with destructive magic. They formed a semicircle and began chanting in unison, building power that made Lyra's fur stand on end. She knew what was coming, knew she should dodge, retreat, find cover, but behind her stood 500 defenders who'd chosen to follow a queen they barely knew against impossible odds. If she ran, they'd be exposed. If she dodged, the spell would hit them instead. So Lyra did something incredibly stupid. She charged the mages head-on. Their spell released in a column of searing energy that could have leveled a building. It caught Lyra full in the chest, and the world turned white-hot and screaming. Pain, unlike anything she'd ever felt, tore through her body, burning fur and skin, driving her to the ground. And then it stopped. Not because the mages ran out of power, because Lyra was still standing. The white wolf had taken the full force of their combined magic and absorbed it. Her fur smoked, her body shook. But she was standing, and her eyes blazed brighter than before. The mages stared in disbelief. "Impossible," one whispered. Lyra showed him her teeth. Then she showed him what impossible really looked like. She moved faster than their eyes could track, crossing the distance before they could cast again. The first mage went down with his throat torn out. The second lost his arm. The third tried to run and made it exactly nowhere. The remaining three broke formation and fled, their bravado evaporating in the face of something their training had never prepared them for. Crow's army faltered. Not broke, not yet, but the certainty in their advance crumbled. They'd been told this would be easy. A quick siege, a few hours of fighting, maybe some resistance from the Citadel guards, but nothing serious. Nobody had told them they'd be facing a legend made flesh. "Hold the line!" Lord Crow's voice boomed across the battlefield. He stood at the rear of his army, mounted on a massive warhorse, his armor gleaming. "It's one wolf. One. Bring it down and the rest will crumble." He wasn't entirely wrong. Lyra was holding the center, but she couldn't be everywhere at once. The army was spreading out, finding gaps in the defense, starting to flank. A horn blast cut through the chaos. Not from Crow's army, from the Citadel. Lyra's head snapped around to see reinforcements pouring from the inner gates. Nobles and their personal guards, the warriors who'd been sitting on the fence during the trial, watching and waiting to see which way power would flow. They'd made their choice. At their head rode a woman Lyra recognized, Lady Thorn, commander of the Citadel's Western Guard. She was older, scarred, with eyes that had seen more battles than Lyra had lived years. She shifted mid-gallop, her wolf form massive and covered in old wounds that told stories of survival. "For the white wolf!" she howled, and her warriors echoed the cry. The reinforcements slammed into Crow's army from the flank, and suddenly the tide was turning. Not quickly, not easily. Men still died, wolves still fell, but the certainty of Crow's victory was bleeding away with every passing moment. Draven fought his way to Lyra's side, his black fur matted with blood, most of it not his own. He shifted partially, enough to speak, his voice rough and urgent. "We need to end this fast. Every minute we fight is another minute for more of his forces to arrive. He's got reserves waiting in the mountains." Lyra shifted too, human form returning in a ripple of power. Her body was a mess of burns and cuts, but adrenaline kept the pain at bay. "Then we cut off the head. Crow dies, the army loses direction. He's too well protected, see?" Draven gestured to where Lord Crow sat surrounded by his elite guard, 50 of the biggest, meanest-looking soldiers Lyra had ever seen. "We'd have to fight through half his army to reach him." "Then we don't fight through, we go over." Draven's eyes widened. "You can't possibly mean—" But Lyra was already moving. She shifted back to wolf form and ran, not at the army, but at the Citadel wall. Defenders scrambled out of her way as she hit the stone at full speed and simply kept going, her claws finding purchase in gaps between stones, her impossible strength carrying her straight up the vertical surface. She reached the top of the wall, 40 feet up, in seconds. Below, the battlefield spread out like a living map. Crow's army. Ironvale's defenders. The clear path between her and Lord Crow, if she was willing to do something absolutely insane. Lyra had been doing insane things all day. What was one more? She crouched, muscles coiling, and launched herself off the wall. For a heartbeat, she was airborne, a white comet arcing across the battlefield. She saw soldiers looking up, mouths open in shock. Saw Crow's face shift from confidence to confusion to pure terror as he realized where she was going to land. Lyra hit the ground directly in front of him with enough force to crater stone and send shockwaves rippling outward. Soldiers flew backward, horses screamed and bolted, and Lord Crow found himself face to face with several hundred pounds of absolutely furious white wolf. His elite guard recovered fast. They formed a circle, weapons bristling, prepared to die defending their lord. Lyra gave them exactly one chance. She shifted back to human, standing naked and covered in blood and radiating dominance that made half of them drop their weapons immediately. "Walk away," she said simply. "Your lord is a traitor and a coward. He sent demons after children. He murdered his king's mate. He doesn't deserve your loyalty. Don't listen to her, Crow shouted from behind his men. She's using dark magic, corrupting your minds. Kill her now. The guards hesitated, torn between training and instinct, between orders and the overwhelming pressure of what stood before them. One of them, a grizzled veteran with a face like weathered stone, lowered his sword. I got kids, he said quietly. If what she says is true, if you really sent something after a baby, I can't stand with that. Me neither, another guard said, stepping aside, then another and another. Within moments, half of Crow's elite guard had abandoned their posts, leaving him exposed with just a handful of loyalists. Crow's face went purple. Traitors, all of you! No, the grizzled veteran said. Just done following monsters. Crow drew his sword with shaking hands. Fine. I'll kill you myself, you abomination. You should have stayed dead when we killed your family the first time. Lyra went very, very still. What did you say? You heard me. I was there 20 years ago when we hunted down the White Wolf bloodline, burned your village, killed your mother while she begged for her child's life. His smile was vicious. You should have seen her face when she realized the seer's spell wouldn't save you, that we'd find you eventually, that Lyra moved, not as the White Wolf, as Lyra, human, breakable, but carrying rage that had been building for 2 decades. She crossed the distance and grabbed Crow's sword arm, stopping his strike mid-swing. His eyes widened as he tried to pull back, tried to overpower her with his superior size and strength, and couldn't. Lyra held him effortlessly, her grip like iron, and brought her face close to his. My mother died protecting me, she said, her voice deadly quiet. She used her last breath to hide me from monsters like you. And you know what? It worked. I survived. I grew up. I found my mate, bore his child, and built a life. She twisted his arm, forcing him to his knees. He screamed. And then you tried to take it all away because you couldn't stand the idea of someone else having power. Well, guess what? I'm taking it back. All of it. And you're going to watch your army surrender, your daughter face justice, and your legacy turn to ash before you die. You can't. The law requires a trial. The law, Draven's voice cut in as he arrived in human form, flanked by Lady Thorne and a dozen other nobles, allows summary execution for anyone who attacks the Alpha King's mate with intent to kill, which you just confessed to doing, 20 years ago and again today. He looked at Lyra. Your choice, quick or slow? Lyra wanted slow. Wanted to make him suffer the way her mother had suffered, the way she'd suffered believing she was nothing for months. Wanted to tear him apart piece by piece while he screamed for mercy that wouldn't come. But as she stood there, Crow on his knees before her, she realized something. She didn't need to. He was already broken, already defeated. Making him suffer more wouldn't bring her mother back, wouldn't undo the trauma, wouldn't change anything except making her into exactly what he'd accused her of being, a monster. Quick, she said finally. He's not worth the extra effort. Draven nodded and drew his own blade. Lord Marcus Crow, for treason against the crown, for conspiracy to murder, for... Wait! Elder Mira's voice rang out as she pushed through the crowd, her ancient face grave. Before you execute him, there's something you should know. The Blood Witch he hired, she's still alive, still in the Citadel, and she's been preparing a final spell. Every head turned toward her. What kind of spell? Draven demanded. The kind that uses a traitor's death as a catalyst. The kind that would have turned Lord Crow into a martyr and painted you as a tyrant who executes nobles without trial. Mira's eyes blazed. His death was supposed to trigger a curse that would corrupt every wolf in Ironvale who'd sworn loyalty to you. Turn them feral, mindless, attack their own families. Silence fell like a hammer. Where is she? Lyra asked, her voice ice cold. The catacombs. I tracked her there an hour ago, but couldn't stop her alone. She's too powerful, and the spell is already half cast. If Crow dies by your hand, it completes. Draven swore viciously. So we can't execute him. Can't even imprison him without risking... I have an idea, Lyra interrupted. She turned to Crow, who'd been listening with a growing smile. You thought you were so clever. Backup plans on backup plans, but you made one mistake. Oh? And what's that? You assumed I'd kill you the conventional way. She grabbed his head with both hands, and her eyes blazed silver. Power flooded through her, not the physical dominance of the white wolf, but something deeper, something that came from a bloodline older than the citadel itself. Memory magic. "What are you— No!" Crow's scream was cut off as Lyra dove into his mind with all the subtlety of an avalanche. She wasn't gentle, wasn't careful. She ripped through his memories like tearing pages from a book, searching for every detail of the conspiracy, the Blood Witch's name, location, the exact words of the curse, every co-conspirator, every bribed official, every secret deal, the identities of the soldiers who'd killed her family 20 years ago. All of it. She took it all. Crow's body convulsed, his eyes rolling back, foam flecking his lips. The spell wasn't meant to be used this way, wasn't meant to extract so much so fast. It was destroying his mind as she worked, burning through neural pathways, leaving nothing but scorched earth behind. Lyra didn't care. When she finally released him, Crow collapsed like a puppet with cut strings. His eyes were open, but empty. Aware, but utterly blank. He was alive, breathing. But the man who'd orchestrated all this suffering was gone. Just a shell remained, drooling and vacant, unable to speak or think or do anything except exist. "There," Lyra said, stepping back. "He's not dead. The curse won't trigger. And he gets to live the rest of his life as exactly what he tried to turn me into, nothing." The crowd stared at her in a mixture of awe and terror. Draven found his voice first. "The Blood Witch?" "Catacombs, Eastern Section, 3rd level down. Her name is Healith Rain. She's 63, missing her left eye, and she's got 2 apprentices with her." Lyra's eyes refocused on the present. "We have maybe 20 minutes before the spell's locked in, enough that she can complete it without Crow's death as a trigger." Lady Thorne was already moving, shouting orders. "You heard her! Eastern Catacombs! I want every fighter who's not holding the walls down there, now!" The crowd exploded into motion. Lyra swayed, the effort of the memory extraction catching up with her. Draven caught her before she could fall. "Easy," he murmured. "You just ripped apart a man's mind. I didn't even know that was possible." "Neither did I until I was doing it." Lyra leaned into him just for a moment, drawing strength from the bond between them. "But we're not done yet. The witch— We'll handle the witch. You've done enough." "The hell I have." Lyra pulled away, forcing her legs to hold her weight. "That woman helped destroy my life, helped create the spell that took my memories, my mate, my child. I'm seeing this through to the end." Draven studied her face, then nodded. "Together, then." "Together." They shifted and ran for the catacombs. Behind them, Crow's army was surrendering in droves, leaderless, purposeless, realizing they'd been fighting on the wrong side of history. Sareth had already been taken into custody, screaming about injustice and false accusations, even as the evidence mounted around her. But the real threat was still below, in darkness and ancient stone, preparing to turn victory into catastrophe. The catacombs of Ironvale were older than the citadel itself, a warren of tunnels and chambers that predated the current kingdom by centuries. Some said they'd been carved by the first wolves who'd settled this region. Others claimed they were natural formations that had simply been expanded over time. Either way, they were a maze. Lyra navigated them from Crow's stolen memories, her paws finding paths that twisted and doubled back on themselves. Behind her, Draven and 24 fighters followed, weapons drawn, senses alert. They heard the chanting before they saw the light. It echoed off stone walls, distorted and wrong, words in a language that made Lyra's wolf recoil. Dark magic. Old magic. The kind that demanded blood payment for every syllable. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber lit by candles arranged in geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. In the center stood 3 figures, 2 young apprentices and 1 old woman missing her left eye, just as Crow's memories had shown. Healith Rain looked up as they entered, and her remaining eye gleamed with malevolent satisfaction. "Too late," she croaked. "The spell is anchored. Even without Crow's death, I can complete it. It'll just take longer, hurt more." Her smile revealed teeth filed to points. "Your wolves will turn on each other slowly, painfully, fighting the madness every step until there's nothing left but beasts." "Stop the spell," Draven commanded, "now, and I'll grant you a quick death." "Death?" Helith laughed. "I'm dying anyway, Boy King. Cancer's eating me from the inside. I've got weeks, maybe days, but this is my legacy. The spell that brought down the great Iron Veil ended the Kyle bloodline and proved that power isn't about brute strength. It's about knowing how to break what can't be beaten. She raised her hands, and the chanting intensified. The apprentices joined in, their voices weaving with hers into something that made reality itself shudder. "Take them," Draven ordered, and his fighters charged. The apprentices broke formation to fight, drawing weapons and combat magic. They were good, well-trained, disciplined, but they were facing wolves who'd just survived a battle against overwhelming odds and won. The fight was brief and brutal, but while the wolves dealt with the apprentices, Helith kept chanting. Lyra felt it then, the spell reaching out, looking for targets. It brushed against her mind, looking for the loyalty oath that would give it purchase, seeking the connection between her and Draven that would let it corrupt, and found nothing it could use. Because Lyra had never sworn a loyalty oath, had never formally bound herself to Draven as an alpha. The connection between them was pure mate bond, primal and older than any magic the witch could wield. The spell slid off her like water off stone. But it was finding others. Lyra could feel it latching onto the fighters who'd accompanied them, beginning its slow work of corruption. They didn't notice yet, wouldn't notice for hours, maybe days. But the seeds were planted. "You can't stop it," Helith crowed. "The spell's alive now, feeding on itself, growing stronger. By this time tomorrow, every wolf in Ironvale who's sworn to serve the crown will be a rabid animal, and there's nothing you can do except watch your kingdom tear itself." Lyra hit her, not with claws or teeth, with pure, concentrated dominance. She'd used it before without really understanding what she was doing, instinct guiding her, power flowing through channels she didn't know existed. But now, with Crow's memories fresh in her mind, with knowledge of her bloodline's capabilities at her fingertips, she wielded it like a weapon. The White Wolf's dominance was absolute. It didn't ask. It didn't negotiate. It simply was. An overwhelming presence that rewrote hierarchy on a fundamental level. And hierarchy was just another word for magic. Lyra seized the spell, not physically, but spiritually, and pulled. She felt it resist, felt Helith scream as her creation was torn from her control, felt the apprentices collapse as the backlash hit them. The spell fought. It was designed to be unstoppable, self-sustaining, impossible to counter once anchored, but it had never encountered a white wolf before. Lyra didn't try to counter it, didn't try to unravel it carefully or dispel it properly. She just took it. She grabbed the entire curse, every thread, every anchored piece, every seed planted in her defenders' minds, and dragged it into herself. The pain was indescribable. It felt like swallowing broken glass and lighting it on fire. The curse fought to corrupt her, to turn her into the rabid beast it had been designed to create. Dark magic flooded through her body, looking for weaknesses, for cracks, for any way to take hold, and found the White Wolf waiting. Her bloodline was old, older than Ironvale, older than the kingdoms and pacts and political structures that had risen and fallen over centuries. It came from a time when wolves were forces of nature rather than civilized beings in human skin, and nature didn't get corrupted by human magic. Nature consumed it. Lyra felt her body changing as she absorbed the curse, not shifting, something else, something deeper. Silver light poured from her eyes, her mouth, every pore. The darkness of the spell met the light of her bloodline, and the two went to war inside her flesh. It hurt. It hurt worse than anything she'd experienced, worse than transformation, worse than the mage's attack, worse than ripping out Crow's memories. But she held on and pulled more, refusing to let a single thread of the curse escape, refusing to let it claim even one victim. She'd spent months as nothing, as a ghost, powerless and forgotten, never again. The spell finally broke. Not dispersed, not countered, consumed. Lyra felt it shatter inside her like glass against stone, its power bleeding away into nothing. The corruption evaporated. The seeds planted in her defenders' minds withered and died. The entire curse that should have destroyed Ironvale simply ceased to exist. Lyra collapsed, the silver light fading, her human form restored. Helith stared at her in disbelief. That's impossible. No one can just... You can't... I can, Lyra gasped, forcing herself upright. Because I'm done letting people like you decide what's possible. Helith's face twisted with rage. She reached into her robes, pulling out a knife carved from bone, clearly preparing one final desperate. Draven's jaws closed around her throat before she could complete whatever she'd planned. The crunch was sickeningly final. The witch dropped, dead, before she hit the ground. Her apprentices followed moments later, executed by fighters who'd had enough of dark magic and conspiracies. Silence fell in the chamber. Lyra stood in the center, surrounded by dead enemies and living allies, her body shaking with exhaustion and residual pain. "Is it done?" Lady Thorne asked quietly. "The curse. Is it really gone?" Lyra checked, reaching inside herself for any lingering trace, found nothing but the usual aches and her wolf's satisfied presence. "It's done." The fighters erupted into cheers, some cried. Others just sank to the ground, relief overwhelming them. Draven shifted to human and pulled Lyra into his arms. She went willingly, too tired to maintain any distance. "You just saved everyone," he murmured against her hair. "Again. Just keeping my people alive." The words came automatically, but they felt right. Her people. Not because she'd claimed them, but because they'd chosen her. "Come on," Draven said gently. "Let's get you above ground. Get you cleaned up, and I get to hold my son," Lyra finished. "You promised." His smile was warm and real. "I did. And a king always keeps his promises." They made their way back through the catacombs, through tunnels that felt less oppressive now that the threat was ended. As they emerged into the citadel proper, Lyra was hit with the reality of what had just happened. They'd won. Against an army. Against dark magic. Against conspiracies that had been building for years. They'd actually won. The courtyard was a mess of surrendering soldiers being processed, wounded being treated, and defenders celebrating in small, exhausted clusters. As Lyra appeared, still covered in blood and ash, a cheer went up. Not from everyone. Not yet. Old prejudices and doubts didn't evaporate overnight. But from enough. From the ones who'd fought beside her. Who'd seen her take the magical attack meant to level buildings and keep fighting. Who'd watched her absorb a curse that should have destroyed them all. From those who knew the truth now, who couldn't deny what their eyes had shown them. Lady Thorne approached, her armor dented and blood-splattered, and dropped to one knee. "My queen," she said formally, "Ironvale stands because you stood first. I pledge my sword and my life to your service." Others followed her lead. Not everyone. Not all at once. But enough. Lyra looked at Draven, who nodded. This was real. This was happening. "I accept your pledge," she said, her voice carrying across the courtyard. "And I swear to you, to all of you, that I will never forget where I came from. I was a servant. I was nothing. I know what it's like to be invisible, to be dismissed, to be told you don't matter." She met the eyes of the kitchen girls, the stable hands, the guards who'd whispered encouragement when no one else would. "You all matter, every single one of you, and as long as I'm standing, you'll never be invisible again." The cheering intensified. Even some of Crow's former soldiers joined in, won over by words that spoke to something deeper than politics. Draven took her hand, and together they made their way toward the royal wing, toward their son. The nursery was heavily guarded now, lesson learned from last night's attack. But the guards parted without a word as Lyra approached. Inside, one of the nursemaids was rocking the cradle gently, singing a soft lullaby. She looked up as they entered and immediately stood, bowing. "My lady, my queen, he's been fussy since the attack, but he's unharmed. "Thank you," Lyra said gently. "Could you give us a moment?" The nursemaid nodded and fled, clearly relieved. Lyra approached the cradle slowly, almost afraid. It had been less than 2 days since she'd first entered this room, first touched this child, but it felt like a lifetime. The baby was awake, his silver eyes tracking movement. When he saw Lyra, he made a small sound, not quite a cry, more like recognition. "Hey," Lyra whispered, reaching down. Her hands were shaking. "Hey, little one. It's me. It's—" She lifted him carefully, cradling him against her chest. He was so small, so fragile, so impossibly precious, and he was hers. The bond between them snapped fully into place, not the mate bond with Draven, but something equally powerful. Mother and child. A connection that had been buried under spells and suppression but had survived anyway. The baby made another sound, one hand reaching up to grab at Lyra's hair. His crying from before was gone. The agitation that had plagued him for 3 months had simply vanished, because he had what he needed: his mother. Lyra felt tears streaming down her face and didn't care. Didn't care that she was filthy and exhausted and still half covered in enemy blood. Didn't care that she was standing in a room she'd been forbidden from entering just yesterday. She had her son. "What's his name?" she asked softly, not looking away from those silver eyes. Draven moved to stand beside her, one hand gentle on her shoulder. "We never named him. I couldn't. Without you, it didn't feel right. I thought—" His voice caught. "I thought the name should come from both of us." Lyra looked up at him, at this man who was her mate, her partner, who'd stood beside her even when his memories told him she was a stranger. "Kael," she said, "for your bloodline, and Sienna for his middle name, for my mother." "Kael Sienna," Draven tested the name, then smiled. "It's perfect." Little Kael made a contented sound and closed his eyes, finally at peace. And in that moment, standing in the nursery with her mate beside her and her son in her arms, Lyra felt something she'd been missing for 6 months. Complete. Not because the battles were over, not because everyone accepted her, but because she knew who she was now. She was Lyra Vance, the White Wolf, Queen of Ironvale, and nobody would ever make her invisible again. The moment didn't last. It never did. Lyra had barely settled Kael back in his cradle when the door burst open and Elder Mira entered, her face grim. "We have a problem." Draven's expression hardened instantly. "What now?" "Crow's reserves, the ones waiting in the mountains." Mira moved to the window, gesturing toward the peaks. "They just got word their lord is defeated, and they're not surrendering." "How many?" Lyra asked, already knowing the answer wouldn't be good. 2,000, maybe more, led by Crow's eldest son, Marcus Jr. He's calling for blood vengeance and rallying other families who were loyal to his father. Mira's voice was flat. "They'll be here by nightfall, and this time they won't bother with siege tactics. They'll just burn everything." Lyra felt the brief peace shatter like glass. Of course there was more. Of course one battle wasn't enough. Nothing about her life had ever been simple. Our forces? Draven was already moving toward the door, his mind clearly shifting to strategy. "Exhausted. Wounded. Half our fighters can barely stand." Lady Thorne appeared behind Mira, her armor replaced with bandages and fresh clothes. "We held against 3,000 because we had walls and desperation. In open combat against 2,000 fresh troops? We'd be slaughtered." "Then we don't fight them in open combat," Lyra said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. "What are you thinking?" Draven asked. Lyra stared out the window at the mountains, her mind racing through possibilities. "They're coming here expecting a fight, expecting us to defend the citadel the same way we did before. So we don't. We give them something they're not prepared for." "Which is?" Lady Thorne's expression was skeptical. "Me." The word hung in the air. "Absolutely not," Draven said immediately. "You just absorbed a curse that should have killed you. You've been fighting for hours. You can barely—" "Stand?" Lyra cut him off. "Walk? Shift? I can do all of that and more. You know what I am now. What I can do." She turned to face them, and despite her exhaustion, despite the injuries and the pain, her eyes blazed with determination. The White Wolf bloodline wasn't just powerful. It was legendary. And legends don't hide behind walls when their people are threatened. "What exactly are you proposing?" Mira asked carefully. Lyra moved to the map table in the corner, studying the territory around Ironvale. "Crow Jr. is coming for revenge. He wants blood, wants to prove his family's strength wasn't destroyed with his father's defeat." She traced a path through the mountain passes. "So I give him what he wants. Single combat, ancient law, his life against mine for the army's surrender." "He'll never accept," Lady Thorne said. "Why would he? His army outnumbers us. He has every advantage." "Because I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse without looking like a coward in front of his own troops." Lyra's smile was sharp. "I challenge him publicly. Announce it to his entire army. If he backs down, he loses their respect. If he fights me and wins, he gets everything he wanted, my head, Draven's throne, Iron Veil's surrender. And when you win? Draven's voice was quiet but intense. When I win, his army swears loyalty to the crown. Every soldier, every family that backed the crows. Total surrender. Lyra met his eyes. We end this today. Completely. No more reserves hiding in mountains. No more conspiracies waiting to hatch. We crush their resistance so thoroughly that no one will dare challenge us again for generations. Mira was nodding slowly. It's risky, but it could work. The old laws are clear. Trial by combat for leadership disputes. If you invoke it correctly, tradition demands he accept or be branded a coward. You're assuming she'll win, Lady Thorne said bluntly. Marcus Jr. is a trained warrior, 20 years of combat experience. He's killed alphas before. So have I, Lyra said. Just yesterday, actually. The room fell silent. I don't like it, Draven finally said. There are too many variables, too many things that could go wrong. Do you have a better idea? Lyra challenged. One that doesn't involve sending our exhausted fighters against fresh troops? One that doesn't risk every person in the Citadel who chose to stand with us? He didn't. She could see it in his face. Then we do this my way. Lyra straightened, ignoring the way her ribs screamed in protest. Send a messenger. Tell Marcus Jr. that the White Wolf of Iron Veil challenges him to single combat at sunset. Winner takes everything. Loser's bloodline is erased from history. Erased? Mira's eyebrows rose. That's harsh. That's necessary. The crows tried to erase me first. Tried to erase my entire bloodline 20 years ago. Turnabout is fair play. Lyra's voice hardened. If I'm going to risk everything on this fight, the stakes need to be high enough that Marcus Jr. takes it seriously. High enough that his army understands what happens when you come after my family. Draven studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. I'll send the messenger, but Lyra, if this goes wrong, it won't. But if it does, then you protect our son. You rebuild. You make sure he grows up knowing his mother loved him enough to fight impossible battles. Lyra moved close enough to take Draven's hand. But it won't come to that. I'm done losing. Done being beaten down. Done letting other people decide my fate. She squeezed his hand once, then released it and headed for the door. Where are you going? Draven called after her. To get ready. If I'm going to fight the most important battle of my life, I'm going to do it properly. Lyra spent the next few hours in something she hadn't experienced since her memory returned. Genuine care. The servants who'd once called her ghost now tended to her wounds with gentle hands and worried expressions. They brought her food, water, clean clothes. One of the kitchen girls who used to mock her broke down crying while bandaging Lyra's ribs, apologizing over and over for how she'd treated the queen. Lyra didn't have the energy to tell her it was fine, didn't have the words to explain that she understood why they'd acted that way, why anyone would dismiss someone they thought was nothing. So she just accepted the care and tried not to think about what was coming. Elder Mira arrived as the servants were finishing, carrying a bundle wrapped in cloth. What's that? Lyra asked. Something that belonged to your mother. Mira unwrapped the bundle to reveal armor, light, flexible, designed for speed rather than heavy protection. Silver and white, marked with symbols Lyra didn't recognize but somehow knew. Sienna wore this in her last battle, the one where she saved you and died protecting your escape. Lyra touched the metal reverently. How did you? I was there that night. Couldn't save her, but I managed to grab this before they burned everything. Mira's voice was thick with old grief. Your mother made me promise that if you ever came into your power, if you ever needed it, I'd give you this. It's been 20 years. Some promises don't have expiration dates. Mira helped Lyra into the armor. It fit perfectly, like it had been made for her. Maybe it had. Bloodline magic was strange that way. Your mother was the strongest wolf I ever knew. Until you. She'd be proud of what you've become. Lyra blinked back tears. I don't even remember her. Then make new memories. Win this fight. Save your people. Build the future she died trying to protect. Mira's hands were steady as she fastened the last buckle. And remember, you're not fighting alone. Every wolf who's ever been dismissed, overlooked, or told they don't matter is fighting with you. Show them what happens when the forgotten remember who they are. The words settled into Lyra's bones like fire. By the time the sun began its descent toward the horizon, she was ready. The meeting point was a valley between Ironvale and the mountains, neutral ground, visible from both positions. Lyra walked there alone, her mother's armor gleaming in the fading light, her body still aching but her spirit burning bright. Behind her, on Ironvale's walls, hundreds of wolves watched in silence. Ahead of her, an army of 2,000 stood in formation, their banners bearing the Crow family crest. And in the center, mounted on a massive warhorse, sat Marcus Crow Jr. He was bigger than his father, easily 7 feet tall, built like a siege engine, with scars that told stories of survival. His armor was black and silver, expensive and practical. His sword was the size of a normal man's body. He looked at Lyra like she was a bug he was about to step on. "So you're the creature that killed my father," he called across the distance, his voice carrying easily. "You're smaller than I expected." "Your father destroyed himself," Lyra replied, her voice just as loud. "I just helped him along. Are you here to talk, or are we doing this?" Marcus dismounted, and the ground shook when his boots hit earth. "I'm here to end the mistake my family made 20 years ago. Should have killed you when you were a child. Would have saved everyone a lot of trouble." "Funny. I was thinking the same thing about your bloodline." His eyes narrowed. "You've got nerve, I'll give you that. Stupid nerve, but nerve nonetheless." He drew his massive sword and settled into a combat stance. "Ancient law. Single combat. Winner takes the loser's army, territory, and bloodline rights. Agreed?" "Agreed." Lyra didn't draw a weapon, didn't shift, just stood there, waiting. Marcus laughed. "You're not even going to shift? Not going to give me a challenge?" "I'm giving you exactly what you deserve." Lyra's eyes blazed silver. "One chance to surrender. Walk away. Swear loyalty to Ironvale and I'll let your family live. Not in power, not in prestige, but alive." "Never," Marcus spat the word. "My family built this region. We crushed the weak, eliminated the threats, created order from chaos. And then you people, you white wolf freaks with your unnatural power, you threatened everything we'd accomplished. So we did what needed to be done. You murdered children. I eliminated future problems." His voice was cold. "And I'm about to eliminate the last one." He attacked without warning, his massive sword swinging in an arc designed to split Lyra in half. She shifted at the last possible second, her white wolf form emerging in an explosion of silver light. The sword passed through empty air where she'd been standing. Lyra hit Marcus from the side with all her considerable weight, sending him sprawling. His armor protected him from the worst of it, but she saw him struggle to rise, saw the first flicker of doubt cross his face. Good. Let him doubt. He recovered faster than she expected, rolling to his feet and bringing his sword up in a defensive position. "You're fast, I'll give you that, but fast won't be enough." He was right, and he was wrong. Fast wouldn't be enough if she was just a regular wolf, even a regular alpha. But Lyra was so much more than that. She circled him, letting her dominance roll off her in waves. She saw his army shifting uncomfortably, saw some of them actually step back, their wolves recognizing what their human minds refused to accept, that they were watching their leader face something he couldn't beat. Marcus felt it too. She saw it in the way his grip tightened on his sword, the way his breathing quickened. "What are you waiting for?" he taunted. "Attack! Fight me properly!" "I am fighting you properly," Lyra replied, her wolf's voice deeper than human but perfectly clear. "I'm showing your army exactly what you are. A bully who only feels strong when he's punching down, when he's killing children or attacking the vulnerable. But faced with a real challenge, you're terrified." I'm not afraid of you!" He charged, his sword blazing with magic that his army's mages had clearly imbued. The blade cut through the air with a sound like tearing reality, aimed straight for Lyra's throat. She didn't dodge. She caught the blade in her jaws. The metal shrieked in protest as her teeth closed around it, teeth that could crush iron, backed by a bloodline that had been ending threats since before the Crows were even a family. The magic in the sword tried to burn her, tried to force her to release it. Lyra bit down harder. The sword shattered. Pieces of enchanted steel exploded outward, forcing Marcus to shield his face. When he lowered his arm, his expression had shifted from confidence to genuine fear. "No weapon," he whispered. "You broke my... That's impossible. Stop using that word. Lyra shifted back to human, standing before him in her mother's armor, unmarked and undaunted. Nothing about me is impossible. I'm exactly what happens when you try to erase someone and fail. She gave him one last chance. Surrender, please, I don't want to kill you. You think I'll bow to some servant girl playing at queen? Marcus's fear was transforming into rage-driven desperation. You think you can just... He pulled a knife from his belt and lunged. Lyra sighed. Then she moved. Her hand shot out, catching his wrist mid-thrust. She twisted, feeling bones snap. Hearing Marcus scream, the knife fell from his nerveless fingers. With her other hand, she grabbed his throat. I gave you a chance, she said quietly. Your father didn't give my mother that courtesy. Didn't give my family any mercy when they hunted us down. But I'm not them. I'm not you. So I tried. She squeezed, just enough to make breathing difficult. But you chose this. Remember that. Whatever happens next, you chose it. Marcus's eyes were wide with terror. Wait, please. I surrender. Now you surrender? After attacking? After threatening my family? After leading an army here to burn my home? Lyra's voice was ice. Too late. You wanted to eliminate problems, so I'm eliminating mine. She could kill him. Snap his neck, tear out his throat, end the Crow bloodline the way they'd tried to end hers. But something stopped her. Not mercy. Not compassion. Strategy. Lyra released his throat and stepped back, letting him collapse to his knees, gasping and clutching his broken wrist. I'm not going to kill you, she said, loud enough for the entire army to hear. You know why? Because death is too easy, too quick. You'd be a martyr, a tragic hero who died fighting the evil white wolf. She circled him slowly, making sure every soldier could see. No, you're going to live. You're going to watch your army swear loyalty to me. Watch your family's power stripped away. Watch everything your father built crumble to dust. And then you're going to spend the rest of your life as a reminder of what happens when you threaten my family. She turned to his army. Ancient law has been satisfied. Your leader surrendered. Your bloodline debt is paid. Anyone who wants to continue this fight, step forward now. No one moved, not a single soldier. They stood frozen, watching their massive, terrifying leader kneeling in the dirt before someone half his size. Then I claim victory. Lyra's voice rang across the valley. By ancient law and blood right, I claim this army, these territories, and all oaths sworn to the Crow family. Do you accept? For a long moment, silence. Then one soldier stepped forward. Young, barely more than a boy. He dropped to one knee. I accept, he said clearly. Another joined him, then another, then dozens, hundreds. Within minutes, the entire army was kneeling, not because Lyra had forced them, because they recognized what their own leaders had refused to see. That power wasn't about size or weapons or training. It was about being strong enough to show mercy when you didn't have to. Smart enough to choose strategy over revenge. Brave enough to stand alone against impossible odds. Lyra turned back to Marcus. Get up. Go home. Tell everyone you meet what happened here. Tell them the white wolf is real, she's standing, and she's done being nice to people who threaten her family. Marcus stumbled to his feet, cradling his broken wrist, and fled. Just ran, without dignity or pride, like the coward he'd always been beneath the armor and bravado. Lyra watched him go, then shifted her attention to the kneeling army. Rise, she commanded. You're not my enemies anymore. You're my subjects, and I take care of what's mine. Return to your homes. Tend your wounded. Mourn your dead. But remember this day. Remember what could have happened if I'd been the monster your leaders claimed I was. They rose slowly, uncertainty written on every face. Go, Lyra said more gently. You're free. Just don't make me regret this mercy. The army dispersed, slowly at first, then with increasing speed as they realized she meant it. No executions, no imprisonments, just release. By the time the sun touched the horizon, the valley was empty except for Lyra. She stood alone, swaying with exhaustion, every injury catching up with her now that the adrenaline was fading. Then she wasn't alone. Draven emerged from the direction of Ironvale, shifting from wolf to human as he approached. He didn't speak, just pulled her into his arms and held her like he'd never let go. You did it, he whispered against her hair. You actually did it. We did it, Lyra corrected, leaning into his warmth. All of us. No, this was you. You gave them mercy when they deserved death. I've never seen anything like that. I didn't do it for them. I did it for us. For Kael. Lyra pulled back enough to meet his eyes. I don't want our son growing up in a kingdom built on revenge and fear. I want him to know his mother chose peace when she could have chosen violence, that she was strong enough to show mercy. Draven's expression was soft in a way she'd never seen before. I love you. I don't remember falling in love with you the first time, but I'm falling again right now, and it's terrifying, Lyra suggested. Perfect, he corrected. It's perfect. He kissed her then, and it felt like coming home, like finding a piece of herself she hadn't known was missing. The mate bond sang between them, fully formed now, undeniable and unbreakable. When they finally broke apart, Lyra noticed movement on Ironvale's walls. The defenders were cheering, the sound carrying across the distance like music. Come on, Draven said, taking her hand. Let's go home. Home. The words settled into Lyra's chest with a warmth that had nothing to do with the bond and everything to do with finally belonging somewhere. They walked back to Ironvale together as the sun set and the first stars appeared. The days that followed were chaos of a different kind. Formal coronation, political negotiations, establishing new laws and restructuring old hierarchies. Every noble family in the region wanted to meet the White Wolf, wanted to assess whether she was threat or opportunity. Lyra handled it all with growing confidence. She'd survived assassination attempts and armies. A few stuffy nobles weren't going to intimidate her. The hardest part was Sereth. The former lady sat in a cell awaiting trial, and tradition demanded Lyra attend as the wronged party. She'd been dreading it, expecting rage or denial or more lies. What she got was worse. Sereth looked smaller somehow, stripped of her armor and confidence. When the guards brought Lyra to her cell, the woman who'd orchestrated so much suffering just stared at the floor. I would have been a good queen, she said quietly. I trained my whole life for it. Learned politics and strategy and how to rule. I would have been perfect. You would have been competent, Lyra corrected. But that's not the same as good. And you are? You, who barely knows how to read court politics? Who fights every battle with brute strength? Sereth finally looked up, and her eyes were empty. What makes you better than me? I'm not better than you. The words surprised Lyra as much as they clearly surprised Sereth. I'm just different. You wanted power for the sake of power. I wanted my family. That's all. Everything else. The throne, the title, the recognition. That's just what came with protecting what's mine. So I lose everything because I wanted the wrong thing. You lose everything because you tried to take it by destroying an innocent person. Lyra's voice hardened. You could have been a good advisor, a strong ally, but instead you chose to erase me, murder a child, and betray your entire kingdom. Those choices have consequences. Sereth laughed bitterly. Execute me then. Get your revenge. No. The word hung between them. What? I'm not executing you. The council voted for permanent exile. You leave Ironvale's territories and never return. You're alive, but you're no one, which, ironically, is exactly what you tried to turn me into. Lyra stood to leave. Enjoy your new life, Sereth. Try to use it better than your old one. She walked away from Sereth's shocked face and didn't look back. 3 weeks after the battle, Lyra stood in Ironvale's throne room for her formal coronation. She wore her mother's armor beneath ceremonial robes, a reminder of where she'd come from. Kael sat in her arms, too young to understand what was happening, but old enough to sense his mother's emotions and respond with happy babbling. Draven stood beside her, wearing his own crown and formal regalia, his hand resting on her shoulder. Before them, the assembled nobles and common folk of Ironvale waited. Elder Mira stepped forward, carrying a crown forged specifically for this occasion. Silver and white, marked with symbols of the White Wolf bloodline, it caught the light and seemed to glow. Lyra Vance, Mira's voice carried through the hall. You came to us as nothing, as a ghost, as someone the world had tried to erase. But you survived. You fought. You protected those weaker than yourself, showed mercy to enemies who deserved none, and proved that true power comes not from domination, but from the courage to stand when standing seems impossible. She lifted the crown. Do you accept the responsibility of this crown? The weight of leading not just wolves, but all people who look to Iron Veil for protection? The burden of being a symbol to those who've been forgotten, dismissed, and told they don't matter? Lyra met Mira's eyes. I do. Then by ancient law and blood right, by choice of the people and recognition of the pack, Mira placed the crown on Lyra's head. I name you Lyra Vance Kale, the White Wolf, Queen of Iron Veil and protector of the forgotten. The hall erupted in cheers, not polite applause, not dutiful recognition, genuine, overwhelming celebration. Lyra looked out at the crowd and saw faces that had once dismissed her, ignored her, treated her like she was invisible. And now they were cheering for her, celebrating her, accepting her not despite what she'd been, but because of it. Because she'd proven that being nothing could transform into being everything. Later, after the ceremony ended and the celebrations began, Lyra found herself alone in the nursery with Kael. Draven had been pulled into negotiations with visiting dignitaries, and she'd taken the excuse to escape the crowds. She settled into the rocking chair, Kael drowsy and content against her chest. Your mother is a queen now, she murmured to him. How ridiculous is that? 3 weeks ago I was scrubbing floors. Now I'm making laws and commanding armies. Kael made a sleepy sound that might have been agreement. I don't know if I'm going to be good at this, Lyra continued softly. The ruling part, I mean. The politics and strategies and all the things Sereth was probably right about. I don't have training for any of it, but I'm going to try. For you. For your father. For everyone who chose to believe in me when they had every reason not to. She pressed a kiss to Kael's forehead. And I promise you this. You're going to grow up knowing your worth, knowing that power isn't about making people afraid, that strength means protecting the vulnerable, that being kind isn't the same as being weak. Good lessons. Lyra looked up to find Draven leaning in the doorway, his formal clothes replaced with something more comfortable. How long have you been there? She asked. Long enough. He crossed the room and knelt beside the rocking chair. You're going to be an amazing queen, you know, not in spite of your past, but because of it. You understand what it's like to be powerless. That makes you more qualified than any noble who's never known real struggle. I still don't know what I'm doing half the time. Neither do I. We'll figure it out together. Draven's hand found hers. That's what mates do. What partners do. Lyra squeezed his fingers, drawing strength from the contact. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for some new threat to emerge, some new conspiracy. There probably will be. Power attracts challenges, but we'll face them the same way we faced everything else, together. You, me, and our son. He reached out to stroke Kael's hair gently. We're a family now, a real one. Nothing can break that. Nothing, Lyra agreed. They sat there in comfortable silence, the three of them, a queen who'd been a servant, a king who'd forgotten his mate, and a child who'd reunited them. A family forged in fire and conspiracy, tested by impossible odds, and stronger for having survived it all. Outside the nursery, Iron Veil celebrated its new queen. Music and laughter drifted through the windows, carrying promises of better days ahead. And for the first time in 6 months, maybe longer, Lyra allowed herself to believe those promises. Not because the threats were gone, not because the struggles were over, but because she'd learned something crucial through all of this. She was enough. She'd always been enough. The world had just needed time to catch up. Lyra closed her eyes and let herself drift, Kael's heartbeat steady against her chest, Draven's presence warm beside her. She'd been a ghost, been nothing, been invisible, but those days were gone. Now she was the White Wolf, queen of Iron Veil, mother, mate, symbol to everyone who'd ever been dismissed or forgotten. And she was just getting started. The story of the servant girl who became a queen would be told for generations, passed down as legend, embellished and mythologized until it barely resembled the truth. But Lyra didn't care about legends. She cared about the real story, the one where an ordinary woman found extraordinary strength when everything she loved was threatened. The one where she chose mercy over revenge, family over power, truth over comfortable lies. The one where she proved that being forgotten didn't mean being gone. just waiting for the right moment to rise. And when that moment came, when the white wolf finally remembered who she was, the entire world shook. That was the story Lyra would tell her son when he was old enough to understand. Not a fairy tale about perfect heroes and easy victories, but a truth about struggle and survival, about choosing who you wanted to be, even when the world told you that choice wasn't yours to make. A truth about a girl who lost everything and fought to take it all back. That was a story worth telling. And as Lyra sat in that nursery with her family, feeling peace settle into her bones for the first time in longer than she could remember, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was just the beginning. Her reign, her family, her life. All of it was just beginning. And this time, nobody could take it away.